Alrighty, chat. Let's get started. Welcome to another Healthy Gamer GG stream. My name is Alok Kanoja. A reminder that although I'm a psychiatrist, nothing we discuss on stream today is intended to be taken as medical advice. Everything is for educational and entertainment purposes only. If y'all are concerned or have a question pertaining to your personal health or seeking medical advice or treatment, please go see a licensed professional. So, how's everybody doing today? We doing good? Huh, chat? So I don't know if y'all joined us yesterday, but we had a little bit of fun, I think. We did a ASMR stream with some bedtime stories, one of which was quite bizarre, TBH. I don't know if you guys are familiar, but we read stories from an old Indian, I don't know if it's like a fable or something, I don't know what to call it, called Baital Pachisi, which means the 25 stories of the vampire, which is all about a king who is trying to bring a vampire to a dark wizard, basically, a tantric. And basically the vampire tells the king, okay, I'll come with you and you can deliver me, but as long as you don't speak. And the king is with his son, who's a prince. And as they're traveling, the Baital, or the vampire, starts telling stories and basically educating the prince in like what the king considers the wrong things, and always tricks the king into speaking up. And then as soon as the king speaks, the Baital runs away, and then the cycle continues again, and there are 25 runs, I guess you could say. Basically, it's like a roguelike. You know, where you do a particular run and it's different every time. We end up screwing up at some point, so you got to start over at the beginning. Is tantric dark? Not necessarily, but oftentimes in the stories, they're interpreted that way. Good question. Wow, Luke. Tantric isn't really dark, but there is dark tantra. There's black tantra, which is like cursing people and things like that. Black tantra, white tantra, and red tantra are the three kinds of tantra, which is interesting because if y'all play Final Fantasy games, you'll notice that there's a lot of correlations with like Buddhist and essentially Hindu mythology. ADHD module is not available. We're hoping to release around the end of the month, but we'll get back with a more concrete release date soon. So yeah, and then we also read Oh, the Places You'll Go by Dr. Seuss, which I think is a fantastic book and very important for our community. So today we're going to be doing a couple of cool things. We're going to be talking a little bit about the iceberg of depression, or the depression iceberg. We're going to be doing call-in streams about just talking to people in our community about what do they want to be and what keeps them from getting there. And then at the end, we're actually going to be launching our September community event. So for those of y'all that don't know, we did the ASMR stream. That was actually a bonus stream that was unlocked through our previous community event, which was the Swap It Challenge. The goal of the Swap It Challenge was to swap out useless technology engagement with healthier habits. We're not talking about, hardcore dopamine detox, no technology. We're talking about week one, instead of doing something useless on your phone for 5 minutes a day, we're going to do something useful for 5 minutes a day, then 10 minutes, then 15 minutes, then 20 minutes. I think the community ended up swapping out over 1,000 hours of useless stuff with useful stuff. And we also unlocked the ASMR stream was the 2 million point milestone. So that was unlocked. So we did that yesterday. Got a very cool event for September. I'm very excited about it. Unfortunately, y'all are gonna have to wait until the end of stream, because if we start it now, then no one is gonna be here for stream. Okay. So yeah. Okay, so let's start. And Jaren Grinders of the world unite. Okay. Azu260 is asking, how does one get to know what they want from life? Very simple. You pay attention to yourself. Okay, so let's talk about depression. So I'd love to talk to you all today about the depression iceberg. And what we mean by the depression iceberg is when we think about depression, when we see depression, when we experience depression, what we tend to notice is sort of what's on the top, what's visible to both ourselves and other people. The tricky thing about depression is that there's a lot that's going on that's actually completely under the surface that we're not really aware about. So today what I'd like to do is talk to you all a little bit about that, okay? So the first thing, hold on a second. Can I start over? I feel like that was off in some way. Okay. I'm getting distracted by Jaren grinding in the chat. Great. So for those of you all that weren't here, I gotta stop reading chat while I'm trying to do this. So for those of you all that yes, Tactile was like, stop grinding his gerunds. Gerund grinder is what GG stands for. Game and kills. That's fantastic. No. Okay, like let's not be elitist, okay? So like for a 24-hour period, we're gonna let other people in the community know what gerund grinding is. So this story was ridiculous. The story was like super long and also had like tons and tons of lists. And one of the lists was like a list of professions. And one of the professions, there were like lecturers, teachers, other like I can't even think, but they had like 30 or 40 things that they just listed out. And one of them was a gerund grinder. And I wasn't sure. I don't know what a gerund grinder is. I don't even know if it's a real thing. But this is what I love about translations of these old Sanskrit texts, right? So these stories were originally told in Sanskrit. And then what happens is like you'll get people from like the 1900s in the UK who were like Indologists. And they'd like learn the Sanskrit language and they'd translate it as best as they could into something. I don't even know if that's like, that was a thing from 100 years ago, or this is like, if it's actually a gerund, because isn't a gerund a noun form of a verb when you add ing to the end? So I don't know how you grind that. And I don't know, man. I just don't know. But I thought it was a hilarious thing, and I think what we're going to try to do as the internet is see if we can popularize this term and see what the internet does with it. So just drop gerund grinder in whatever internet dialogues you have, and let's see if people start understanding what it is. Google says it's a pedantic grammar teacher. Okay. So I guess what that means is that's kind of like a grammar Nazi, right? That's the current term. Gerund grinding has two gerunds in it. That's so good. Okay. Let's do real stuff. All right. Enough. So by the way, I loved yesterday's stream. I don't know if like, so, you know, we've got some important stuff to do today, right? Like we have to do important things. We have to talk about the depression iceberg. The problem is that the more important things we do, the less fun we have. And so sometimes we got to just like not teach anything, not try to help anyone, and just have a good time. Sometimes, right? Okay, let's go back to the depression iceberg. All right. I'm not going to look at chat, okay? I keep on saying I'm not going to look at chat, but as Cherry Pie Mode is saying, Jared Grinder is a proper name. That's hilarious. Okay. Okay, I got to stop. All right, I'm going to actually okay. So today what we're going to do is talk a little bit about the iceberg of depression. And what I mean by that is that for most people who experience depression or know someone who has depression, they only see particular features that are at the top. And what I mean by at the top is that's what's kind of visible to everyone. The tricky thing about depression is that it's way more than just what we see or even what we experience. Research shows that for people who struggle with depression, there are actually profound effects that start early on or maybe in adolescence and can actually propagate throughout life and create situations that we don't really think of as being caused by depression. Oftentimes we think about depression as an episodic kind of illness where it comes and goes. And so that's sort of what the science actually tells us, is that mood disorders like major depressive disorder and bipolar disorder, they come and go. The tricky thing about the iceberg of depression, what that sort of reveals to us, is that there are permanent changes, or not permanent changes, but really more longitudinal changes that build up over time that are sort of independent of the episode of depression. So that's what we're going to kind of be focusing on today. So we're going to start by talking a little bit about what people see or what people experience when they're depressed. Then we're going to go into a little bit about the theory of depression. So what do we understand from psychological research, and as psychotherapists and psychologists and psychiatrists basically explore what depression does to people? What are the major sort of theories that we understand? What is happening in the mind of a depressed person? Then what we're going to do is go more into like kind of harder research and try to look at outcomes relating to depression. So how is the life of someone who is depressed impacted over time? The last thing that we're going to do is try to tie it all together and try to understand, okay, what does depression look like? What are the theories around depression? How do those theories manifest in life? And what does that sort of end up as? And the last thing that we're going to do is actually go into what do you do about it, right? So once we understand the theory, once we understand the impact, then we can sort of start to formulate a road forward. So let's start with what's above at the top of the iceberg, what we see, what's above water. So the first thing that people see when we think about depression is someone who's depressed. So oftentimes people will adopt that label themselves. They'll get diagnosed with that label. So we sort of acknowledge that there are people out there who are depressed. We will even acknowledge to ourselves that, okay, I'm depressed, I struggle with depression, things like that. So that's kind of like pretty simple. It's sort of like what people see. What does someone who is depressed sort of present as? They can be kind of more socially isolated, have difficulty doing fun stuff, can sometimes feel a lot of shame and guilt. They'll also have low energy level, have difficulty concentrating, have changes to their sleep, appetite, sometimes kind of really, really dark and pessimistic or even suicidal thoughts. So that's what depression can look like. People will identify it, people will sort of see it in other people. Pretty simple. The way that depression actually manifests is a little bit more subtle. And that's actually people who are what we would call losers. So these are people who haven't really done a great job in life. We'll kind of look at them and we'll sort of label them with something that's kind of quite derogatory and quite sort of blaming, right? This is someone who's kind of a loser. They're not really doing a whole lot in life. Sometimes we also, if we struggle with depression, will feel that way about ourselves. We don't conceptualize it as depression. What we sort of conceptualize it as is a failure to do basically what we're supposed to be doing in life. The third way that depression appears from the outside, or maybe even the way that you experience it, is actually the most subtle of all. And that is that people who are depressed can sometimes be someone who does barely good enough. So sometimes when we struggle with depression, we're actually doing okay in life. We graduate from college, we have a job, we have some friends, we maybe date a little bit here or there, but it's sort of like we're doing the bare minimum in life. We're not really able to achieve our highest potential. We're not really like excited every day. You kind of wake up every day, you pull yourself out of bed, dig really deep, pack your food, go to work, really try really hard, but sort of do the minimum responsible at work. And then you kind of go home at the end of the day. And then like the cycle sort of repeats. You spend some time cleaning, you spend some time going to the grocery stores, you force yourself to kind of socialize like two nights a week, maybe spend a lot of time playing video games or spending time on technology. And you kind of feel like you're not a complete failure in life, but you're also not living life the way that it's supposed to be. And so life just sort of feels like a slog, even though you're kind of doing the enough. So this is the first thing to understand, is that this video isn't just about people who identify as depressed. This is really for people who identify as depressed or identify as losers or identify as someone who is doing barely good enough. So what do psychologists actually say about, what's going on in the mind of any of these people? So this is where we're going to focus on two major theories. The first theory is going to be the cognitive theory. So what's sort of happening in the mind of a depressed person. The second theory that we're going to be focusing on is the interpersonal theory. And in the interpersonal theory, this is sort of looking at the way that people with depression interact or relate to the people around them. And as we kind of go into this theory, essentially what psychologists discovered is depression isn't all about the mind and what's going on up here. It actually has a lot to do with the way that you relate to other people, the social relationships that you form or fail to form, and then those impacts on you. Because ultimately, depression can be incredibly isolating and leads to a lot of loneliness and shame. So let's take a look at the cognitive theory. So someone named Teasdale is kind of credited for sort of exploring a lot of this stuff, but what Teasdale essentially discovered is that we'll have some form of mild depression. When we start to feel depressed, what it actually does is activate particular constructs in our mind. So for diagnostic criteria, if you look at things like the DSM, this is what we call negative self-attitude as psychiatrists. In cognitive behavioral therapy, this will also be called core beliefs. In the yogic system, this is what's called a samskar. But essentially, like I have some depressive symptoms, and then my mind activates a particular programming. It starts running the appropriate program for depression. And the interesting thing is that when we activate these constructs, so an example of this is like, when I'm starting to feel depressed, I'll start to think that, oh, I'm a loser. And then what happens, this is what's really, really interesting, is what Teasdale did is look at people who suffer from mild depression or severe depression. And he tried to understand what's the difference between someone who suffers from a mild depression versus a severe depression. What's different in the minds of these two people? And what he found was one major difference, which is that both people sort of struggle with depression symptoms at the beginning, but then some people will activate particular mental constructs which will shape new information. And depending on how much they shape and interpret new information, that is actually what leads to a severity of depression. So let's say that I'm feeling kind of depressed and I have trouble kind of getting out of bed in the morning and I wind up at work. And then someone sort of notices that I'm late and they may sort of ask me, hey, why are you late today? So that person may not be blaming me, they may not be indicting me, they may not be criticizing me, they may actually be concerned and curious and be trying to help. But depending on what is active in our mind, how our mind interprets that that inquiry, we'll sort of end up in one of two different places. So if that negative construct is active, what I'll sort of interpret that as, oh my God, this is a criticism, I'm screwing up, I'm late again, people are noticing, I shouldn't be late, how is it that other people are able to be on time and I'm not able to be on time? And so it's that kind of activation of the interpretation of new information that results in the severity of depression. There's a difference between sort of the initial depressive symptoms and then almost getting depressed about being depressed. And once that starts to happen, that's what sort of leads to the severity of depression. The other really interesting thing that researchers have discovered, and this is what's actually so devastating, we'll get to this at the end, is that when we activate these negative constructs, not only do we interpret new information differently, we also go back and reinterpret memories. And this is what's actually really, really devastating about depression. So in the past, if I did something successfully and I was proud of it, when I activate one of these negative constructs, what it'll actually cause me to do is go back and reinterpret that success. It'll cause me to go back and rewrite history. So let's say that I got first place in a competition in school 5 years ago. I used to think that, okay, I got first place because I worked hard, I'm proud of that. But as we become depressed and these negative constructs start to reactivate, we go back and rewrite history. And then suddenly, instead of deserving to win, I won because I got lucky. I start to think about all kinds of things that make it so I didn't really deserve to win. And I start to reinterpret the past. As we reinterpret the past, we'll sort of get to this a little bit later, we start to form particular conclusions, which actually make it really, really hard to move forward in the future. So that's sort of the cognitive theory on depression, which sort of posits that as we get depressed, we form these negative constructs. And these negative constructs are filters that are used to interpret new information and also rewrite history. The challenge is that the conclusion tends to be quite negative. The second theory that we're going to focus on is the interpersonal theory. So in the interpersonal theory, what researchers were looking at is not what's going on up here, but as someone gets depressed, what actually happens to their interpersonal relationships? So they made a couple of interesting observations. The first thing that they observed is when we initially get depressed, oftentimes people will voice some amount of support. So, as I start to feel bad about myself, I'm like, oh yeah, work has been really hard. I'm kind of down. Like it's hard for me to, I don't feel like going today to the party. Like y'all go without me. And then what our friends will do, what our spouses or significant others will do, is they'll initially like try to help, right? They're like, oh, this person is my friend. I care about them. This person, I love them. Let me try to expend additional energy to help them overcome the depression. That's the initial response. What researchers actually discovered, though, is that over time, that response actually diminishes. And actually, what people will start to do is withdraw from the depressed person. So what people will feel is that with subsequent episodes of depression, for example, like divorce rates start to climb, partners start to feel a little bit disillusioned with the relationship. Oftentimes, our friends and family and loved ones, they kind of don't know what to do at that point. It feels to them like all of their effort doesn't really amount to much because the depression keeps coming back. So what researchers actually discovered, and Coyne is a good example of a researcher who looked at this kind of stuff, is that there's an initial outpouring of support followed by withdrawal of support over time. And so this sort of leads to social isolation. The other thing that researchers discovered, which was really, really interesting, is that depression also shapes the way in which we engage in social interactions. So as we get depressed, sometimes we sort of get rusty in terms of social skills. So if I spend, let's say, 3 or 4 months, going to school, but not hanging out with friends, not going to any parties, not going to any birthdays or anything like that, I'll kind of get socially rusty. As I get socially rusty, or as the depression starts to affect me in social situations, I start beating myself up too much, I'm stuck too much in my head, I'm just not able to enjoy things. A combination of all of those things decreases positive reinforcement from social interactions. Basically, what happens when you're depressed is that it's hard to interact socially. I don't have as much fun interacting socially, which means that the reinforcement for me to go out and socialize actually declines over time, right? I'm not really getting much out of it, so why bother doing it in the first place? So this was actually a really important discovery because essentially what we found is that people who are depressed actually get less positive reinforcement from social situations, which in turn means that they will willingly decrease their social activity. This isn't the rest of the world ostracizing you. This is a part of your brain that sort of recognizes, hey, this just really isn't worth my time because I'm not getting much out of it. So once we kind of put those two things together, sort of these constructs that our mind produces that interprets information, as well as the social impacts, what we discover is that these things will result in a number of different impacts over the course of life. And what we're looking at now is essentially people have done research, longitudinal research on adolescents and teenagers who start to suffer from depression. And as these people grow up, we've been able to determine, okay, what actually happens in the lives of these people. So the first thing that happens is that we've noticed that there's a decrease in academic and professional performance. So this starts with something as simple as when you're depressed, you actually experience cognitive difficulties. So your mind and brain literally are not working the way that they're supposed to. So it can be difficult to focus, difficult to pay attention, difficult to have the energy to study. And that will actually have rippling effects out for kind of the rest of your life. Originally, what this will do is start to decrease your grades, but then people have actually tunneled down and seen other things. So as students start to do poorer in school, what they actually find is that teachers will spend less time on them. So teachers and athletic coaches, for example, will focus on the kids that they think have a lot of potential. And as you start to get Bs, as you start to get Cs, what happens is fewer and fewer opportunities are made available to you. The teacher kind of doesn't, the teacher's really focusing on the brightest kids in the class to try to support them to live up to their potential, whereas you're kind of a C student. That over time leads to fewer opportunities, makes it difficult to engage and develop like healthy study habits, which leads to poor academic performance. As our academic performance goes down, that actually translates into poor job performance. Once again, we have the direct impacts of cognitive problems in the workplace. I can't concentrate, I can't focus. But if we don't do as well as at school, what we discover is that people's capacity to go further in education actually decreases when we become depressed. And then as that further education decreases, our employment opportunities start to decrease. As our employment opportunities start to decrease, our sort of work performance or professional performance starts to decline. So this is where, remember that depression is an episodic illness. And so even if I'm depressed for, let's say, 6 months during my second year of high school, my sophomore year, but what can happen is that can actually have lasting impacts on my GPA, lasting impacts on my extracurricular opportunities, lasting impacts on what my teachers think of me, lasting impacts on, whether I go to uni, what uni I go to, what I study, and what kind of jobs I get. The second thing that people sort of noticed longitudinally is that people who struggle with depression also have difficulties in social relationships. So this we've sort of talked about a little bit, but what we sort of noticed is that when people are really struggling with depression, especially during our formative years, like adolescence and young adulthood, we sort of miss out on particular social milestones. We end up not really dating much during high school or even university or college, and then we find ourselves being 23, 24, 25. We're not depressed anymore, but we never really have dating experience. And if we don't have dating experience, that sort of creates this construct of, I don't know how to date, relationships aren't for me, or no one values me in a relationship, I'm not going to be able to get dates. So that's where those two things kind of combine, and we'll really start to predict the future in a way that's independent of the actual depression. So we start to see social impacts like that as well, where we sort of miss out on milestones. We kind of miss out on opportunities to level up our social skills, which then also impacts places like jobs. So what we tend to find is that when people struggle with depression, part of the impact of that lack of social skills actually translates into getting promoted or not getting promoted. Because oftentimes people who get promoted, who advance in their job, are the ones who develop good social skills, right? It's these soft skills like getting to know people, like, going out to hang out with people after work, kind of someone who's likable and charismatic in the office is more likely to get promoted. So the social skills will also negatively impact our professional performance. Okay. The last thing that researchers kind of noticed is that depression actually impacts the way that we experience romantic relationships and even things like mate selection. So this is where oftentimes when we get depressed, we start to feel ashamed of ourselves. We start to think of ourselves as having low value, especially as we miss out on particular dating milestones. That becomes kind of more of a problem. But there's another subtlety here, which is really interesting. I've seen this a ton as a clinician, where when you're depressed and you don't think you're a very good person, it changes who you're willing to date. So oftentimes there may be an opportunity for a good and healthy relationship, but you feel so intimidated by someone who you think is better than you because they don't struggle with depression. They seem to have their life together. And even though there's chemistry, even though the person expresses interest, even though y'all are vibing, you think that, oh, this person is too good for me. And so you actually retreat from that person. The other thing that I've really noticed, so as I've worked with more people who struggle with depression and the rise of dating apps, is that there's this internal self-selection, which when people have struggled with depression, they oftentimes think of themselves as broken. And so they feel intimidated by anyone who's whole, which in turn means that they feel more comfortable with other people who are broken. And I think there's a lot of good value to bonding with someone over a shared negative experience. Like we see a lot of really strong bonding over things like, cancer, addictions, even things like depression, losing a parent. There are all kinds of things that we can sort of form healthy bonding relationships over adversity with people. The challenge is that if I'm looking for someone who's just as broken as me, let's say I end up connecting with someone because we're both depressed, that actually makes the relationship way harder. Because first of all, a relationship is hard to manage when no one is depressed. It becomes way harder to manage when one person is depressed. And it becomes twice as hard when both people get depressed. And so what actually happens in terms of mate selection is oftentimes people who struggle with depression will try to find people just as broken as them. And as they start to date someone who's just as broken as them, it actually becomes really hard to make the relationship succeed. Because when I'm depressed, what I actually need is someone who can support me through that if I want to build a healthy relationship. When they're depressed, they need someone who will help support them through that. And when sometimes that depression kind of overlaps or people end up taking turns and people just end up kind of burning out and the relationship falls apart. So these are three of the really common and unfortunately impactful aspects of depression. remember that this transcends the individual depressive episode and starts to have impacts in sort of a larger scale in life. So we're talking about things like decreased academic performance, which leads to less support in school, worse grades, which leads to fewer opportunities in higher education, worse employment opportunities. Worse employment opportunities when you start, right? So if you enter at the entry-level position as opposed to a manager-level position because you have an MBA, that's going to lead to impacts over the next 5, 10, 15 years of your life. We also see a lot of social impacts where people are sort of isolated, they don't develop social skills, they kind of miss out on opportunities. And then lastly, we see a lot of stuff, especially in mating selection and romantic relationships. So now what we're going to do is try to figure out, okay, so like, how do we understand what's going on here? How do we summarize all of this stuff? So here's how I try to put it together for y'all. So we know that when someone suffers from a depressive episode, they're impaired in particular ways, right? So I have cognitive impairment, I have low energy, I have trouble getting out of bed, I have all these negative thoughts. Those thoughts over time will start to form negative constructs. And the trickiest thing that people with depression really suffer from is not just the depression itself, but the things that they start to believe about themselves that are independent of the depression. This is where the idea that I'm a loser kind of comes in, right? So it's not just that we don't really kind of blame our current circumstances on the depression. If I was depressed for 1 year in high school, that doesn't explain why I've never been on a date, right? So what starts to happen is that sort of has a rippling effect out, and we start to make conclusions about ourself. And this is actually what's so devastating. Because once we make a conclusion about ourselves, that isn't something that can be treated. Once I determine that I'm not worth loving, once I determine that I'm just not as good as other people, once I determine that I don't bring value to friendships, I make an identity-based statement about myself. And that's when something really subtle happens, because it's no longer an illness. It's no longer something that happens to me. It starts to become who I am. And the tricky thing about that is, even if I treat the illness, even if I wave a magic wand and make the depression go away, what I'm left with is that identity construct that was built up due to the depression. The worst thing about that is once I start to believe these things, it starts to inform my future. It starts to inform the way that I look at things. So now if I believe that I'm unlovable, if I believe that no one would ever want to date me, I'm not going to bother dating. Even if I meet someone who like expresses interest in me, I'm going to be so confused by that. I'm going to think they're trying to trick me when actually they're genuinely attracted to me. They're genuinely interested. It's going to be so confusing to me that I'm actually going to reject that person. And the reason I'm rejecting that person is because of this construct that I built up of myself. So in psychiatry and sort of depressive diagnosis, this is what we call negative self-attitude. So this is a predominant belief about myself that's negative. In cognitive behavioral therapy, we call these core beliefs. And the tricky thing about this is that like whatever happens ends up being my fault, right? So this is what happens in the mind of a depressed person, because they interpret all of the information through the lens of I'm broken in some way. The worst thing about that is that as we try to move forward in life, that voice keeps us from actually moving forward. So let's say that there's a promotion opportunity at my job, but if I've already concluded that like I'm not a good worker and I don't bring much to the table and I'm not valuable to this company, those are all I statements. Remember that. That's not the depression. That's just the belief that I have about myself. I'm never going to apply for the promotion in the first place. And then that's going to become a self-fulfilling prophecy, because I've been at this company for 5 years. I've never gotten a raise. I've never been promoted. So that's what's so devastating about this stuff, is once these attitudes cross over from the depressive episode to a sense of identity, then they start to inform our future. They start to shape our future. And remember that through the cognitive theory of depression, we also know that even past successes, once we develop identity constructs, will be reinterpreted. That the 2 relationships that I did actually have in high school, if I got depressed in college, now I'm going to reinterpret those as, oh, like those people, I'm not really useful. I was kind of scamming them. I was pretending to be a good person. They didn't really know the real me. So we'll start to actually ignore contrary evidence. So this may sound kind of devastating, because what we're sort of positing is that depressive episodes have impacts that actually transcend your life. I mean, depressive episodes have impacts that transcend the episode itself and will linger on in your life. So does that mean you're essentially screwed for the rest of your life? If you missed out on these milestones, if you never dated, if you didn't get straight A's, does that mean that you're screwed for the rest of your life? The answer is thankfully no. And there are three really simple things that we can do to start the process of kind of getting on the right track. The first thing is actually engage in mental health treatment. So what I'm talking about is if you've never done it before, go get clinically evaluated, go see a psychiatrist, go see a therapist. There are medications that can help, psychotherapy can help. You don't have to pick one or the other. There's a lot of different stuff that you can do. The second thing is to examine the narrative of your life. So oftentimes what happens with people is that they have depressive episodes. Life is hard, right? So like if my brain is not functioning correctly because I'm depressed, I will do worse in school. Then comes the interpretation. Since I do worse in school, I'm stupid. I'm not a good student. School isn't for me. My brain just doesn't work like that. I'm not like the other kids. Those are the kinds of interpretations which you kind of make based on your cognitive constructs and filtering information. That identity stays with you. So essentially what you've got to do is go back and reinterpret a lot of what's happened to you. Start to reshape how you formed your identity. So if you have some kind of negative thought, right? So school isn't for me. How did you start to believe that? What were the circumstances during that time? When did you start to believe that? And what you'll oftentimes find is that that belief was based on circumstances that were actually outside of your control. This is something that I myself understood really well. So I started school younger than the other kids. I started school a year earlier. And so I was a 5-year-old or 4-year-old actually competing against 5-year-olds in sports. And what I found is that like a 4-year-old just can't keep up with 5-year-olds. There's just so much biological difference between how fast a 4-year-old can run and how fast a 5-year-old can run. But what I concluded, being 1 year younger than all the other kids, is I'm bad at sports. And so then even when high school rolled around and now people are roughly the same age, everyone's kind of going through puberty. Some people start early, some people start late. Even though I'm actually on an equal physical level, I was never picked on teams growing up, right? So teachers or coaches really didn't give me much attention. I didn't really have an opportunity to practice. I was physically smaller. And so I developed this idea that, oh, I'm unathletic. I'm bad at sports. And that's something that actually I carried with me. But through narrative interpretation, I've started to realize, actually, I'm not unathletic. That's just the circumstances of my time. And so as we go through our life and we reinterpret our narratives, something very interesting will happen. Because once we start to think negative things about ourselves, once I believe that I am a loser, there's no point in trying, right? That's what actually really screws us. It's not the depressive episode itself. It's the things that I believe about myself because I've gotten depressed in the past. That's what really holds me back. And in the same way that as we can kind of understand through the cognitive theory of depression, remember that we go back and we reinterpret successes as failures through that negative construct. And something really, really cool can happen. When we go through this narrative process, which is oftentimes what happens, that's the nuts and bolts of therapy, for example, we start to change attitudes about ourselves. So I start to believe, oh, actually, I'm not a loser. And then something really magical can happen. Once I start to believe that I'm not a loser because I've correctly interpreted past events, what that actually does is gives me motivation, hope, and energy going forward. It now becomes easy to apply for promotion. It now becomes easier to date. I now start to realize that after I've been on 5 dates with someone and they're texting me every day, it's not like they're playing some elaborate trick. Maybe I'm actually useful as a human being, and there's something here that's worth dating. And so it starts to change our attitude and starts to give us opportunities to kind of move forward. And that's kind of the third thing which I want you all to really sort of focus on, is just because something has been true in the past doesn't mean it needs to be your destiny. So just because you believed something about yourself or you have failed in the past does not make you a failure. Because a failure, there's no point in trying if you are a failure. If you're a person who always fails, there's no point in trying. So I want you all to be really, really careful, and this is the third thing. Watch the thoughts and conclusions that you have in your mind that keep you from doing something today or doing something tomorrow. What you'll sort of discover is that there's a very subtle, this happened in the past, Therefore, I am this. And once I am this, it informs what happens in the future. There's no point in trying. So catch that thought, which says there's no point in trying, don't bother, don't do this. That kind of doubting voice, the voice that's telling you that, you're not going to succeed. Because that's actually what is creating the self-fulfilling prophecy. And as you give up on trying, you don't succeed, you fall further behind, and then the voice actually becomes stronger. So catch that voice that is sort of telling you that because you failed in the past, there's no point trying in the future. The last thing that I'll sort of share with y'all is that we know that there are some very interesting novel mechanisms which disable this kind of identity construct. So we know, for example, that ketamine, which is a novel antidepressant therapy, essentially deactivates this part of your brain. People have also done studies on meditation and have basically tried to figure out how can meditation help people with depression. We know that meditation can actually create clinical benefits, but the question is, what's the mechanism? And it appears that the primary mechanism of meditation in sort of disarming depression is through sort of negating the sense of identity. It's sort of in this ego death aspect where as we meditate, we start to let go of parts of ourselves. And as we shed layers of identity, one of the most important layers of identity that we can shed through meditation is, I am a loser. So if y'all are sort of struggling with depression, if you're trying to understand, what does depression actually look like? The first thing that I want to share with y'all is that, this is a lecture for people who are not just identifying as depressed, but also people who feel like losers. And even if you're not clinically depressed at this moment, if you've been depressed in the past and you feel like a loser today, we really have to understand how an episode of depression can shape your life going forward. And the last group of people that this is for people who are doing barely good enough and are kind of confused because, or actually not even confused, but they're sort of like looking at their lives and they're trying really hard, but they're sort of barely crossing the mark, right? They're barely kind of overcoming the hump that they need to. They're sort of doing the bare minimum. And oftentimes, if we fall into these three camps, what we don't appreciate is that struggling with depression, even for a period of our life, can actually start to have rippling or long-lasting effects on other parts of our life. The good news is that once we understand this situation, we can start the process of reinterpreting things, changing our narrative, and starting to build motivation and hope. So let's move to questions. Questions? Yeah, so Coco Jays is starting with, I never thought of I'm a loser category as almost a near depression state. That's exactly what I'm saying. So this is the tricky thing, is that when we suffer from depression, especially if it's undiagnosed, we don't attribute our failures to the depression, fundamentally. We attribute them to a failure of self. It's me, it's my fault. And once it becomes an identity thing, as opposed to a circumstantial thing or an illness thing, then it becomes permanent, right? Because if I am a loser, there are two types of people in life. There are winners and losers. And if I fall into the loser category, then that's it, right? Game over. And so what we need to understand is that if you, it's that idea that there's winners and losers, that people can't change, that people are fixed. I mean, that's completely false. Right? Personality changes over time. People develop over time. Just because you failed one class doesn't mean that you'll fail all the others. And the flip way to put it, which is kind of does, just because you got straight A's in the first grade doesn't mean that you get straight A's for the rest of your life. But our mind doesn't think logically. What the mind does is thinks, oh, now that I've gotten one F, I'll get F's all the time. But it's tricky, right? So Suera 10 is asking, how can you even find motivation? So this is really, really important to understand. There's one thing that people don't get about finding motivation. So the key thing that many people who are missing, who are struggling to find motivation, is actually confidence. And you may say to yourself, but that's kind of weird because isn't motivation like energy to perform an action? What does that have to do with confidence? The two are actually very tightly connected. So your body's ability to generate energy to complete an action has to do with the likelihood of success. Okay? So I don't know how else to say it, but you can generate energy to go to the bathroom because you know the bathroom is there. It's 100% guaranteed. If I walk out the door, I can walk to the bathroom, I can use the bathroom. It's easy. This is also why like fast food, so many people do fast food. Why are we motivated to eat fast food? It's because it's guaranteed. It's so easy. It's like I know exactly what I have to do. It's 100% guaranteed that if I go to a fast food restaurant, I can get some tendies, I can get some burgers, fries, whatever. It's consistent. It's guaranteed. So when we lose confidence in ourselves, the likelihood of success actually decreases. There may be an objective likelihood of success, but our confidence in ourselves is our subjective perception of our likelihood of success. And as we lose confidence in ourselves, what'll happen is our success chances go down. As our success chances go down, our brain tells us, don't bother. So if you're struggling with motivation, the first question you should ask yourself is, are you confident in yourself? And if the answer is no, then what you should actually work on is confidence, which may sound very paradoxical. I'm not motivated to study. What does that have to do with confidence? Why aren't you motivated to study? Because a part of your mind is telling you, even if you study, you're such a screw up, you're going to wait till the last minute. It's not like you're going to get an A anyway. Way more connected than people realize. So work on confidence first, and the motivation will actually follow. There's a whole video about that, by the way, in our upcoming guide called the Action Success Calculation, where we go into the actual neuroscience of this calculation and like how it's like baked into our brains. It's fascinating. So alleviating depression, first of all, clinical evaluation and treatment, number one. Second thing is reinterpret the narrative of your life. So as we live life, we construct a narrative about why our life is the way that it is and who we are. Our narrative gives us a sense of identity. The problem is, depending on our identity, that's going to handicap our future efforts. I'm broken. I'm a loser. I'm not worth loving. If I'm telling things like that to myself, my chances of success are going to be like super low, right? It's like people say you have to believe in yourself. So how do you start believing in yourself? You start by actually being very, very critical about how you formed the beliefs that you have already. How did I start to believe I'm a loser? How did I start to believe I'm not a good person? Etc. Third thing is to catch the thought that tells you to not try. So once I have a certain identity, I'm not good at school. School isn't for me. That's going to restrict my actions today and tomorrow. So someone says, oh, hey, like you should really consider, a company is offering like a higher education program. You can get a master's degree, and like we'll pay for it as long as you come back and work for us. And then like there's like an opportunity. Someone has seen talent in you. But if you have this idea that school isn't for me, then it's going to shape your life. You're not going to take that opportunity, which in turn will become a self-fulfilling prophecy. So catch what your mind tells you today and tomorrow that sort of is born from the depression. And once you catch it, then you can start to notice it, hopefully alter it. The better guy saying, I fall in and out of depressive states. Are there strategies to find triggers? Absolutely. So, you can do things like they're like depression journals and stuff like that, but that's usually where a clinician can help you a lot, right? So if you actually go see a doctor, they can help you do that because they may be aware of other triggers that you may not even be looking out for. So often like things like is there a seasonal component to depression? Is there a menstrual component to depression? There are all kinds of things that doctors are going to be aware of that you may not even think about looking at. Other examples of, potentially like triggers to depression, vitamin D deficiency. There's all kinds of stuff that like people aren't really aware of. That's absolutely why seeing a clinician is worth it. Is the idea of permanence what defines depression in a way? Great question, Polymath TTV. So here's what I'd say. The whole problem, the purpose of this kind of depression iceberg is that if we look at major depressive disorder, mood disorders, or bipolar disorders, these are episodic illnesses. Okay, so they come and they go. The tricky thing, though, is that the effects of one episode can reverberate through the rest of our life. And so this is what really confuses a lot of people who suffer from depression is even after I, quote unquote, treat the depression, fix the depression, whatever, there's still a bunch of other stuff that I think is not related to the depression, which I think is me. So if I'm depressed and I don't go to parties for 6 months, and now that I'm cured or in remission, what I don't realize is that, like, I'm still going to have some lingering effects, which is that I'm socially anxious, I don't enjoy parties, I look like an idiot at parties. So the lingering conclusions from the depressive episode live with us. And that's what's actually so devastating. Because all we see is the episode at the top, oh, I'm depressed. But the whole point is that it has reverberating effects throughout our life. Now, are those permanent? Only as long as we're not working on them. And this is what's really cool about the cognitive theory of depression is as we change our interpretations, as we change our mental constructs, we can actually go back and rewrite history in the opposite direction. We can start to realize, oh, the reason I never dated in high school is not because I'm a loser. It's because I had an illness that prevented me from dating. Those two thoughts are very, very, very different and will shape the way that you behave when you go on a date. When you go on a date and I'm not worth dating, if the person is 5 minutes late, you'll interpret that one way. Whereas the reason I've never dated before is because I've had an illness, completely different interpretation. And you can change those. Right? So in the sense that they're not permanent because they're never going to change. What we mean by permanent is that, not really permanent, but they last beyond the duration of the episode. And that's what's really tricky. So Scrubnub is asking, how do you overcome feeling evil due to immoral actions of the past? Feels worse to me than branding myself as a loser, or harder to forgive? Great question. So in the diagnostic criteria of a mood disorder, we use a term called negative self-attitude. So that doesn't necessarily mean feeling like a loser. So why do we use the phrase negative self-attitude? Because it encompasses a group of negative feelings which we hold about ourselves, including guilt. So oftentimes the way that guilt, why do we feel guilty? Because we're bad people, because we did bad things. And we hold on to it in just a illogical manner, as we will hold on to shame or suicidality or anything else. So this is where, like, the same stuff applies. So I'd start by seeing a clinician, and then I'd sort of start to really think about what makes you think that this action was immoral. What were the circumstances? Were you driven by something? How did you decide that it was immoral? What amount of, like, shared responsibility is there for your behavior? Did you do something immoral because that's what your parents taught you to do? There's all kinds of interpretations. So it's not just about forgiveness per se. It's really first about really understanding where that action comes from. And once you understand where it comes from, that's what paves the way to forgiveness. You can't just jump straight to forgiveness. So let's say that, for example, like, you know, I had a parent, so let's say my parents are divorced, and one of them was always, like, stashing away cash for a rainy day, because in their experience, like, partners cannot be financially relied upon. And so I learned this survival mechanism from my parents, or my parent. Then when I enter a relationship, I'm, like, very, very shady about finances. And then that causes problems in my relationship. And then my partner feels betrayed. You're hiding things. You're stealing. And then I feel like a bad person because, yeah, I'm hiding things and I'm stealing. But where did that behavior come from? You have to understand it. Then it makes it easier to forgive. Oh, I realize that this is something I was conditioned to do. Doesn't mean that I completely lack responsibility, but there's a good reason why I was doing it. Even if it's sort of a bad reason going forward, there's a reason why I thought this was a good idea at the time. And once you sort of understand that, then you can forgive. Because understanding is the prerequisite to forgiveness. Okay, so I see we've got a lot of other questions, but we've got call-ins to get to. And I'm noticing that we're 1 hour in already, so let's kind of shift over. Okay, let's shift over. Man, so many good questions. I'm thinking that maybe we should not combine these things in the future. All righty. And our topic for today is going to be, what do you want to be and what keeps you from getting there? Yo, Tech Teller. Oh. Alone.
Ready?
Okay, let's get started. Hello.
Hi.
I'm not hearing anything. If you're speaking,
Are you not
is
hearing me?
that maybe me?
Yeah.
Input. Tech Teller, can you say something?
Testing.
Oh,
Can
yeah,
you
I
hear
think
me?
it's me.
It's
Why
him,
don't
yeah.
I... Hold on. Because I can't hear either of them, which means that... Let's see. Let me try this. Okay, so I'm hearing music, but... Tech Teller, try to say something again?
No. Can you hear
Huh.
me? Guess not.
Weird.
Hi, chat.
Not volume. Okay, let me try disconnecting. Let's close Discord. Yeah, I muted it so that we don't get that. I muted it on stream. Because like if you play like, you know, some kind of music that's copyrighted, doesn't it just like auto mute you? Voice and video. Mic test. That's weird. Okay, so the audio device works. Let's try this. That's weird. Yeah, I don't hear the Discord sounds, but my
Test.
audio device works. Testing.
Test.
Testing. Okay. So my
Definitely.
mic is working. Output volume. Huh. What to do? Sorry for the technical difficulties. Okay, so this looks like it's working. Whoever's here, can y'all try saying something? I don't know why I'm not hearing anything. This is so weird.
Test. Can you hear
me?
this?
Yeah, I'm not hearing a damn thing. The device... Okay, it's the same device. Yeah, my Discord output settings are set to my... Okay, so I can hear... Y'all can hear that, right? That's the audio. And that's the device that my output is set to. Not hearing anything on Discord. Weird. What do y'all think? Try... It's not headphones, because I can hear the headphones fine. Like, I can hear the pings and stuff. So it's not the headphones. Music works. The audio, the output device for Discord is set to the same thing that it's set to for when I'm hearing the tone. So that's not it. What else could it be? But I'm not hearing it on... So usually when you change the audio input, you hear like a tone, right? On Discord, that's so weird. Alt F4. I mean, I can try opening up and closing Discord again. This is like literally same setup I use all the time. Okay, now it's working.
Test.
All right, say
Hello?
something.
Testing.
Nope. I heard a ping,
No.
though, when I joined. Y'all heard that, right?
Yep.
Like,
Oh,
I heard the
stop
reconnection
talking.
sound. That's so weird, dude. Like, it's playing one thing, but not anything else. Hold on, let's go join a random... People talking? Nope. Study together is muted. Okay, let's try this. Testing, testing.
Oh, what?
Nope, can't hear anything. Okay. Dude, I don't know what to do. This is so weird. Huh. Okay. We could try. Oh, no, I mean, like, we heard the tone when we rejoined, right? So let's try this one more time. We're going to exit Discord. Okay. Then we're going to... Oh, y'all heard that, right? So Windows sound is working. Let's listen for the tone. Okay, there was the tone. That's the tone. That means that Discord sound is working. Right? Are we correct there? We're sitting in this channel. Discord sent me a ping. But I can't hear anything. What the F? I wonder if I... Actually, I wonder if it's like something like... Is it Spotify that's messing up? Check the Windows volume mixer. Dude, that's what I keep changing. This is the volume mixer, right? Now we can't hear him either? Okay, say something,
Well,
y'all.
Test. We weren't
Yeah,
speaking.
Tech Teller's talking,
Test.
but I don't hear anything. I have headphones plugged in, but I don't think it's a... If I'm in streamer mode, does that mean that it's going to be muted? Enable streamer mode. Let's disable it. Try now. Testing, testing.
Test.
Nope.
Test. Nope.
Let me try calling Tech Teller. That's a good idea. Hello?
Test.
That's so weird. Like, I can't hear Tech Teller, but I can hear the call.
On.
Oh, he said test, test? Say
I
that-
did say hello.
Okay,
Test.
say it again.
Test.
Yeah,
Hello?
now I hear
Hello?
it.
Wait, what? You do?
Yeah, now it's coming.
Okay.
Okay, so I wonder if it's something weird. Like, am I muted in that lobby or something? Say something.
You're probably not, but I'll make a new lobby and test that.
Okay, now it's working. Hello?
Hello?
Hello. Okay, success. Okay, hopefully Tech Teller doesn't make a new lobby. Props to whoever said just try a call. That seems to have reset something. Okay, hello, my friend.
Hi. Hey, Dr. K.
How are you?
I'm alright. A little bit nervous about talking and stuff. I should probably turn on my webcam, right?
It's whatever you prefer. So we're not going to show it on screen unless I misclick something, because as we just discovered, I'm a boomer. But we're, you can turn it on if you want to, but it... Okay.
Yeah, it's on. Don't
Hello.
worry about it. Yeah. You can call me David.
Okay, nice to meet you, David. So I think the topic today is what do you want to be and what's getting in the way?
Yeah. So, when I answered the prompt, I kind of said that I want to be a lot of things. There's like a lot of goals that I have in mind for life. Like I want to be financially successful, socially adept, someone that's generally confident, kind of what people have in their head when they think of like a good person, kind of like, you know, a Giga Chad.
Okay. And so what are the elements of a Giga Chad? Explain that to us, David.
So I guess they're like confident in who they are. They're financially successful, at least in my head. That's what I would think. They're healthy. They're generally have a good circle of friends. They have healthy relationships. They're secure in their attachments and in those relationships.
Someone's been doing some homework. Secure in their attachment. Okay. And where are you in relation to all of this stuff?
I'd say I'm pretty far removed. I I'm in university right now, so I don't have a career per se, but I am pretty nervous because I graduate this year. I'm going to be graduating about 8 months from now,
Okay.
and I don't have like a career prospect. I don't have like I haven't really put much thought into what I'm going to be doing, you know? I haven't applied to jobs, I haven't done an internship, I haven't done any of that. Whereas like people my age, I see they're getting involved. They're we have something in co-op called co-op where I'm from, where your university helps you find a career related to your field, and you work with them for a period of 16 months, so 4 semesters, and you graduate with like kind of your foot in the door, you know? Whereas I don't have any of that. I'm kind of just graduating.
So
I
you
don't know.
didn't do co-op?
I just didn't have that option. Like it's not in my.
I see. Okay. And can I ask what you're studying?
Yeah, I'm studying something like it's kind of weird. It's called graphic communications management, but it's actually like printing, like industrial printing. But you can also go into graphic design or packaging and stuff like that.
Okay. And so it sounds like you want to be a lot of things: confident, financially stable, healthy, social, have secure attachment. So it sounds like you're on track to graduate. So I suppose congratulations or condolences. I'm not quite sure.
I guess it's an achievement, but I don't really like. I guess I'm not very nice to myself in that sense. I'm just like, I graduated, but yeah, that's what you're supposed to do, right? Like I haven't done anything special, I feel.
Okay. So, can I think for a second?
Yeah, go ahead.
What about health, social stuff?
Health-wise, I think I'm all right. I go to the gym pretty regularly. I have a routine and everything, but it's not like I just do it because I kind of have to. It's just like a duty thing, right? Like you do it because you have to, you don't do it because you want to,
Okay.
type of thing.
And how is that okay that you do it because you have to?
I mean, people always talk about how after you work out for a little bit, becomes a little bit addicting and you want to do it, but I've never really had that. Like it still takes like willpower and for me to do it, which I guess is what I would call discipline.
Does it feel like you're disciplined?
I guess in keeping with that routine, yes, but with other aspects of my life, probably not.
How do you feel about yourself?
In general,
Yeah.
that's a tough question. I'm not too sure. Some days it's like, yeah, I'm doing pretty all right. I think I'm doing pretty well, and other days it's like, what the hell am I doing? What am I like here for? I haven't done anything with my life, you know?
Okay. When are you supposed to have done something with your life?
That's a good question. I guess it just depends on who you are. Like I could look at someone that's my age, like there are people in my age that are have signed like their rookie contract in the NBA and they're making 6 million, $7 million a year. Whereas there are other people my age that are, not in university. They maybe dropped out of high school, maybe they're not employed or in education or anything. So it's hard to say.
Yeah. So you bring up a really good point, David. That when are you supposed to be a Giga Chad? Like,
Mm. I think it could happen at any point in your life, right?
yeah. So, and then you also kind of pointed out that like I asked you, when are you supposed to be successful, basically? And you said that depends on who you look at. There are people I could compare myself to that are more successful than I am, and according to you, basically. And there are people I could look at who are less successful than I am. So how you're doing depends on who you compare to.
Yeah,
What do
so
you?
it's all like relative, right?
Yeah. So I wonder if there's anything else, like, whether you're successful or not, whether you're happy with where you are, how you feel about yourself, anything else that you could set that bar to, as opposed to comparing to someone really successful or comparing to someone not successful at all?
Maybe someone just like me, like someone that's in university.
Yeah, someone just like you. I like
Hmm.
that idea. Who is the person who is most like you? Can we argue that the closer we get to you, the better the comparison will be?
But I guess it also depends on kind of what objective you're trying to achieve with that comparison, right?
Good. Excellent. What objective are we trying to achieve with the comparison?
It's hard to say, maybe to determine whether I'm successful or not.
Excellent. Right? So like we have
Yeah.
to, like, if we're going to make comparisons, let's try to make the fairest comparison, right?
Yeah.
So like, if you're successful, like what's your net worth? Like I'm 21 years old and I run a $10 million company that I started 3 years ago. When I got a $20 million investment from my parents, and 3 years later, it's worth 10. I built it. You going to compare yourself to that guy?
Probably not, right?
Right?
I'm not like them at all. Yeah.
So who is the closest person we can compare you to?
I would guess someone in the same program as me who doesn't feel too secure about their prospects after they graduate.
Excellent. And do you know anyone like that?
I know people who are nervous, but I'm just like, our situations aren't the same because you've had the opportunity to have like, they've done an internships elsewhere. They've stick one out, right?
Yeah.
Like on their own accord, and I haven't done that.
How can we get to someone even closer than that?
Someone that tried to but didn't, or I guess maybe not even tried because I didn't try.
Yeah. So is there anyone that you know who's in your major that didn't try to get an internship, et cetera, et cetera?
Well, my situation's a little bit special. I kind of had the option to do one, but uh, it's a pick and choose. You can choose to do an internship for like 3 months, or you can go abroad for international exchange. I chose international exchange.
You chose what?
International exchange, like an exchange program abroad in a different country for 6 months.
And how do you feel about that?
Well, I've already done it.
Mhm.
I'm glad I did it. It's like a very transformative experience. You meet like tons of different types of people and see how things are different like halfway across the world. I went to Europe and I'm from North America. But I come back and it's like I'm missing that like kind of foot in the door now. I don't have that experience that everyone else does, right?
Mm-hmm.
Hmm.
Yeah. So I think what we're sort of getting to, David, is that the person you should really be comparing yourself to is yourself,
Yeah, probably.
right?
But
And this is where I think we've sort of discovered. Does that make sense? Like, because as you pointed out, like, so our mind. So let's take a step back. You don't feel confident in yourself, right?
no, yeah, yeah.
You're like, I'm doing what I'm supposed to at my age. And when are you supposed to be a Giga Chad? Not yet. But also, I kind of don't feel good about myself, even though you're kind of doing what you're supposed to be doing.
Hmm.
So, and yet you don't feel great about yourself. And then, as you pointed out, depending on who I compare myself to, like, when are you supposed to be what you strive to be? Like, when are you supposed to be, like, confident, financially stable, healthy, have a healthy social circle, maybe in a relationship with a significant other? Sure as hell is not supposed to be 8 months before you graduate. I can guarantee you that.
I was kind of thinking like the earlier the better, right?
Why?
Because that's kind of just life, right? If you're more ahead, that's like life is probably better, unless that's wrong.
I mean, if you're ahead, what does that mean?
like having a good circle of friends around you, a good support system, developing those early, getting into good habits like exercising, etc.
Is it a competition?
It kind of feels like one, like
Kind of
when
does.
it, yeah, just like a rat race kind of.
Yeah. But is it?
I guess when you really think about it, no, but I think the world is set up in a way where it's kind of designed to be, right?
Yeah. 100%. The world tries to compare you to other people all the time. Because there are
Hmm.
people out there, David, who are thinking to themselves, oh my God, I wish I was like David. David is so much better than me because he's exercising regularly. And this guy is disciplined. He doesn't even want to work out, but he still works out. And he's graduating and I dropped out of school. What? It's useless to compare.
Right.
So this is where, like, I'd say a couple things. The first is where you are, I think, is developmentally appropriate. Do you know what that term means?
Like the way I see the world and the way I am is appropriate for where I'm at in the stage I'm at in my life, or my
100%.
age.
I do not expect a 21-year, I mean, I don't know how old you are, but someone who's 8 months away from graduating from college to be financially stable, have all their social life sorted out. Like, what's the job of a college student?
Study, kind of set their life up for success later in life.
Sounds like you're exercising. Sounds like you're going to graduate. Sounds like you've got some stuff to figure out. What do you think?
I think I have a lot to figure out, not just some stuff.
I agree. You have a lot to figure out. How long do you have to figure it out?
It again, it depends, I guess. Figure out like
No, it doesn't.
career-wise, get it done. Does it not really?
Nope. Literally, how long do you have to figure it out?
Like everything? I guess I have my whole life, right?
Absolutely. The amount of time you have is until you die. That's like literally how long you have to figure it out. What do you think about that?
I feel like there's a good time and a bad time to figure things out. I think there's like such a thing as figuring things out too late, and which may put you behind, which brings us to the whole thing about it not being a competition, but it definitely feels that way.
Yeah. Have you figured things out too late, David? Has that
I
happened to
think
you before?
there are things that I know that I don't know that I feel like I'm behind on.
So what are you going to do about it?
The easy answer would be to say, figure it out, but no one tells you how, right?
Good. So how are you feeling about this conversation?
I'm not sure. I don't know, like, kind of if it's gonna change the way I see the world or the way I'm thinking, what I'm gonna learn from it.
Yep. I completely
I'm
agree. We're,
just a little unsure.
yeah. So we're going to try to share something with you. We'll see whether it changes things or not. But I'm asking a lot of questions. I think you're giving all the right answers. I think that this is where, like, maybe I can help you synthesize into a hypothesis that you've put together. So, David, I think that there's advice that we give people, right? So, like, number one is don't compare to other people. And what you've actually really done is given us a very good argument for why that is. Because it's sort of like, there's no point in comparing because you're just not in that situation. And if comparison is off the table because it's really like it's just useless. Like it's like if I, heaven forbid, at the age of 15 got into a car accident where I had a cerebral hemorrhage and lost a part of my brain, like it's useless to compare myself to people who like that didn't happen to. What's acceptable or not acceptable, what's appropriate or not appropriate, whether I'm ahead or behind. You can look at anyone else, and as you pointed out, depending on your comparison, you will be ahead, and depending on your comparison, you will be behind. And even if you are ahead, you won't be happy.
Why is that?
It's because that's not where happiness comes from. Because you are ahead of some people, right?
Right, yeah, that's
Does
true.
it make you happy?
No.
So, like, let's say you started like working out more than you did, or you have a GPA that's slightly better than another human being elsewhere on the planet. Is that going to make you more happy?
It might give me like a little bit of pride if knowing that I'm doing well, and that I'm doing like I'm good at something, but
That will give you
ultimately
pride.
doing not.
But doing well and knowing how to do something has nothing to do with comparison.
That comes from within.
Yeah. Right? So it depends on whether you're measuring up against like what you care about or whether you're comparing to someone else. Does that make sense? Because you're ahead of some people, and it's not like you're 50% happy because you're ahead of 50 people. Like, sure, you can take every university student in your school, you can rank them, and you can objectively be somewhere. You can do that. But it's not like moving up 5 ranks or moving down 5 ranks makes you happier. Right?
Right. Yeah, I hear you.
So this is where I think there are a couple of things that we got to sort of think about. So then it's like, okay, so we're on this call and you're like, okay, so what do I do about it? Because I'm not confident in myself. So that's where I'd say like number one is like, what you should like your confidence in stuff is going to come from your satisfaction with yourself. It's not going to come from outperforming someone else. Agree or disagree?
I agree. Yeah.
So like now we get to, so how do you move forward from here? Like, why are you not confident in yourself? I don't mean that as like a deep existential question. I mean, like literally, what are you unhappy with about yourself?
I would just say I'm just not happy that I haven't been able to achieve a lot of things that I feel like I should have.
Like what?
Like I maybe these are out of my control, but I haven't really made friends in university. I was, because COVID, virtual for 2 years. I had my first semester in person, and I kind of just like, I don't know. I've changed a lot in the last couple of years. I was a huge shut-in, very shy, didn't really talk to people, had a lot of trouble with stuff like that.
And you've
And then
changed a lot? In what way?
I think I can talk to people easier now, like based on the fact that I'm here, you know? I probably wouldn't have done something like this a couple of years ago.
Do you feel good about yourself for that?
No, but there are people that let me know that I should be.
Yeah. So that's kind of tricky, right? So like here you are, actually like decently on your way to become a Giga Chad.
I wouldn't say that, but sure.
I am saying that, right? So
hmm
I know you wouldn't. If you were saying it, then I wouldn't have to. And what do I mean by that? Like, so you're going to graduate from college. Sounds like you were one hell of a shut-in, plus the COVID pandemic, and you're like growing. Like, so here's what I see. I see like what's happened into the level, like what's happening to your XP bar, David. Do you play games?
Yeah, I do.
What's happening to your XP bar?
It's going up, right?
Are other people going up faster or other people higher level than you? Sure. But like your XP bar is going up. That's why I'm confident that you're well on your way to become a Giga Chad. Now there's more to it than that. But basically what I'm hearing is that, so you're graduating. So that's one step forward in the financial standpoint. Confidence is like confidence is not increasing despite the fact that you're getting better. Can we agree with that? Like objectively, you're getting better. You're socially better. You're exercising every day. People can't see you, but you've got a nice head of hair, so that's, that's working for you. So it sounds like you're healthy, sounds like you're improving socially, and you're also like here, which actually indicates to me that this is a good prognostic sign because you're working on yourself intentionally. This is the one thing that most people your age don't do, which is that they just kind of like AFK instead of being like very intentional. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that does.
So, and I think it's developmentally appropriate. Like, I don't know how to say this, David, but at 21, I'm assuming you're 21. Who knows? But 22, 20, whatever. How old are you?
20.
Okay, so you're 20, and you're going to graduate in 8 months, right?
Yeah.
So you're like, technically, you're ahead of the game because most people graduate when they're 22, right?
Yeah.
What do you think about that? Does that make you happier?
I feel like I could have done better. Like, oh, I could have graduated in 3 years instead of 4. I could have, if I really tried, I could have graduated last year.
So now we get to why you're not confident. Okay? So I'm going to ask you a question, David. When there is something you could be confident about, what does your mind do to it?
It, what's the word? Invalidates it.
Very good. Right? Can you be proud of you exercising regularly?
I could be, but like my mind just tells me you should be doing this anyway.
Exactly. So, like, this is the problem. It's not actually that objectively you're doing anything bad. It's that anytime you have a win, your mind doesn't let you record it in the W column. It takes your W's and shifts them over to the L.
Right. Yeah. I get what you mean.
Like, isn't that weird?
Yeah. I honestly think I know where it comes from, probably from my childhood.
Shocking.
Yeah.
Tell us if you feel comfortable.
Yeah, so this isn't exactly childhood, but this is probably the one that stands out the most in my mind. I was 18. This was my first semester of college, and I don't know how the GPA scale is in America. It's different here where I'm from, but it's basically, it goes from 0 to 4.33, and 4.33 is like the highest, and anything above like 3.6 is like an A, is like an A. So after my first semester, I had a GPA of 4.27. And I showed my parents because they wanted to see how my grades are doing. And my mom looked at it, and I was like, and she looked at the courses, so they were like a few, like most of them were 4.33, and then I had like one 4.00, which is like the next grade down. And then she was like, so you need to do better on this. This is still bad. And then after that, I kind of just like, I was a little bit disillusioned. I was like, okay, I'm just not going to show you my grades anymore if that's all you're gonna have to say. And I haven't shown them since. So
Okay, so help us understand, David, because you're introspective and you've got an answer for us. What connect these dots for me? What is that story? How does that relate to you? What's going on? Lay it out for us.
I guess I take what I've been told all my life in my childhood, because if it was happening then, it was happening before as well, and I've kind of internalized it.
What were you told and what have you internalized?
That I'll never be good enough.
What do you think about that?
Some days it does feel true. Like there will always be someone better than me, right?
That is correct. That is a statement of fact. There will always be someone better than you.
hmm I guess it shows through a lot of my personality. Like I always kind of want to be the best in things that I care about.
And why do you want to
So
be the best?
I guess it's just something I've carried over from what people have told me.
Sort of, right? So I think the reason you want to be the best is because then you'll be confident, right? If you're number one, then you'll be happy. Then you'll be confident. You'll have achieved. You'll win the race. And then you'll feel good about yourself. With me?
Yeah, yeah,
Now, here's the thing. You strive to be number one. But every time you take a step forward, what do you do with the W?
turn it into an L.
Absolutely. You're playing a rigged game. Do you see that? You're trying to solve the confidence by achievement. But anytime you achieve, you move it to an L, which is how we get someone. So let me explain something to you, okay? This is going to sound kind of confusing. So bear with me, David. I knew a guy once. His name was David. He was 18 years old, started college, got a 4.27 GPA. He exercises, was a social shut-in. Years later, despite the pandemic, is getting socially better. Is basically like doing pretty well in a lot of dimensions, like has some rough parents and things like that. Man, that guy is nothing to be proud of, right? Because he ain't
Yeah,
perfect.
That sounds absurd when you put it like that, right?
So here's the tricky thing. The one thing, because you're doing a really good job. We already said you're introspective. You've come a long way. Okay? You may not feel like it yet, but hopefully, who knows? We'll see. We're going to just do the best that we can today. And that's all that we can do. It's not like we can do better and it's not like we can do worse, right? And if it's not good enough, it's not good enough. So one thing that I want to point out to you about your story that really stuck out to me. When your parents saw your report card and they said, you need to do better at 4.0, what did you do in response?
I became like kind of apathetic and I rejected their response.
Incorrect. This is the growth point. You didn't reject their response. What did you decide to do physically? You shared this with us.
I I just stopped showing them my grades.
Absolutely.
Hmm.
And the reason you stopped showing them your grades is because you actually accepted it, right? You didn't reject what they say. If you truly rejected what they said, you would have kept on showing them report cards. If they want to be unhappy, they can be unhappy. That's on them.
Right.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, that does now.
The second you stop showing them the report card is the second you didn't need them to tell you anymore. You just internalized it.
Hmm.
Like, what do you think about that?
I mean, like, my grades are still the same, like, throughout these years. I'd say I'm doing all right, doing pretty well, but I don't ever, like, my grades are like one of the strong points where I feel like, yeah, I'm doing good. I'm doing well. I don't really have anything to worry about there.
Do you show them to your parents?
No,
Why not?
because I know what they're gonna have to say about it.
And how does what they say about it make you feel?
Before it would probably make me feel bad, but now it's like I just don't care enough, or like I don't hold their opinion about my grades in a high regard.
So I think you've learned. We don't really know, right? But I would hypothesize, like, put something to you, which is that, like, you still do care. You've just learned how to be calloused. Like, 'cause
Probably,
it's going to
yeah.
hurt, right? Because you want to be proud of your grades. And if you're really proud of your grades, it's like, you know, like, other people can be upset with it, but when we're confident in ourselves, other people can say whatever they want to and it won't affect us.
Right.
So,
Yeah.
but what I'm hearing from you is, like, you're not showing your parents because they're still going to be disappointed in you, because that's like, it's not perfect, which means they're not going to be happy. And you don't want to deal with that.
Yeah, it's just too much of a headache to like get into an argument about something
Yeah,
like that.
right? So when we say too much of a headache, like, we're going to interpret a little bit there. You're going to feel hurt because they're not proud of you. And since they're not proud of you, you know, you don't know how to be proud of yourself, et cetera, et cetera. We've already kind of covered that. You with me?
Yeah, I'm with you. Yeah.
So a couple things, like, what do you think? I mean, how do you move forward from this, David?
I guess
It's a hard
kind of
question.
grow. Yeah, grow and stop caring, kind of about what they might have to say.
Yeah, so I think eventually, I hope that you get to a place where you're okay with them not being happy with you. Because that's on them. Like, let me ask you a question. You don't have to answer this, but I'm just trying to think about whether I should ask this question. Okay, you don't have to answer this, but it's tease up because I'm going to give you a hypothetical. Do you want kids one day?
I've always been in the camp of no, but I have a sister and she's pregnant, and I was like, maybe my opinion will change, but I still think I'm like 70-30.
Okay.
No, yes,
So let me
yeah.
ask you a question. If your sister, if you could transplant consciousness with your sister, and you had a kid one day, and your kid, after one semester of college, came to you and showed you a 4.27 on a report card, what would you say to your kid?
I tell them good job. I, I don't know, probably not what my parents said to me, but I don't know how to like kind of compliment people and tell them I'm proud of them. That's weird because I've never been shown.
And would you tell your kid, good job? Would you be proud of them? Would you think they need to do better?
No, I think they'd be doing fine.
Would you be happy with what they've accomplished?
I would be, yeah. But I think this is like another can of worms, maybe. Like, I
Sure.
feel like grades don't matter that much.
Great. Right? So there's another can of worms. And maybe you'd go out and celebrate. That's what you do when your kid comes home with a 4.27 out of 4.33 GPA. Right? And so then, like,
Yeah.
why would you do that for, let's say, your niece or your child, but, like, you can't do that for yourself?
I guess the answer is just it's harder to be proud of yourself than for someone else, right?
Yep. That's a part of it. But I think that, too, is because your parents didn't show you, not only did they show you not how to not celebrate, they didn't show you how to be proud of yourself. So this is something you're going to have to work on. But, like, I would just play with these thoughts for a little while, David. So a couple questions. Otherwise, I'm going to summarize.
I need to think about that for a second. I guess when I'm like talking about like when people say how to be proud of yourself, like what is that feeling like? Like, because I don't know what that means.
Yeah. Absolutely. I think it's really confusing for you. And that's okay. You'll learn. Just like you've done a good job in basically all the other dimensions of your life, right? Which I know sounds shocking.
Yeah, it
You're like,
does.
what the But you're someone who's 20 years old, about to graduate from college, exercises, has a good GPA, studied abroad for 6 months. Like, sounds pretty sweet. You'll realize this later, David. But like, kind of like I'm
Probably.
saying, like, so for each of those things, like, imagine you had a daughter or a kid or son or whatever, right? And then like, they were like, Dad, I want to go study abroad for 6 months. What would you say?
Yeah, do it. I did it, and it was great. I loved it.
Right?
Hmm.
And yet somehow your fucking mind moves that into the L column.
Yeah, I guess I did.
Even though your experience is positive.
Hmm.
So like, you look like you're about to say something or ask something.
Oh no, I was just thinking about like when I first wanted to go on exchange. And I told my parents about it. They were like, "No, you can't. What are you stupid? Like, why would you want to do that?"
So, as you defied expectations, what was your experience of life?
It was better. I got to like experience something I never would have.
Okay. So let's try to piece things together. Number one, life gives you expectations. Expectations come from out there. As we fulfill expectations, we don't actually become happy. Comparisons are expectations, right? Taller, shorter, smarter, stupider, better GPA, worse GPA. Doesn't actually, and even as we like advance in the ranks, right? Because objectively, you're probably in the 5th percentile of people your age in terms of like objective performance. What percent of people exercise regularly, have the GPA that you have studied abroad? That number is like probably smaller than 5%. Does that feel like you're in the top 5%? Of course not. And that's because here's the thing, like basically what you've got to do, David, is like, so here's what we've learned, okay? So first of all, expectations come from the outside. There's a voice in here. And anytime you feel pride in here, you compare what you feel in here to what the world says. You take that W, move it into an L. That's why you're not confident. Because you don't let yourself be confident.
Hmm.
You never get to record a W. Right?
Yeah, I don't. Yeah.
And then we also have like, so I can tell you, you by all means continue learning this lesson on your own. But like as you advance, so as you want to be confident in yourself, you've been taught that achievement and living up to expectations will make you happy and confident and successful. All those three things come together, by the way, right? They can't be teased apart,
Yeah.
right? It's not like you can be successful and happy. Like that's insane. The idea of being successful and unhappy. Like, can you imagine graduating at the age of 21 with a 4.27 GPA, being so successful and being really unhappy and lacking confidence in yourself?
Yeah, I could because it's like happening to me, right?
Shocking. External success and living up to expectations and happiness are not one and the same. The more that you live to satisfy the outside world, this is what you end up with. Someone who's got to be a lot to be proud of and doesn't know how to feel pride. So what does this mean for you? So number one, you're doing fine. Relax. You'll get there. It's not a race. There's a certain amount of patience you need to have with yourself, right? Like you don't need to be perfect at the age of 20. You don't even need to be perfect at the age of 30. You don't even need to be perfect. You're not going to be perfect. You're never going to be perfect. You could die 5 years from now. You could die tomorrow. You could live to for 60 more years. You got plenty of time. So how do we decide if we're not like if it's not a race, right? Which I acknowledge that society is going to tell you it's a race. Like, how do you make decisions? And I think you've made a couple good ones. Like you decided to study abroad. Has it set you back in some ways? Actually, yes. because you studied abroad instead of having work experience. So just fix that, right? Work on it, supplement it. But like this ultimately comes down to listening to yourself instead of listening to external people. Because when you actually listen to yourself, even though you made a mistake, my God, David, you made a mistake. You wasted a semester studying in Europe. Instead of doing an internship at Dunder Mifflin Paper Company. Because you have a degree in industrial printing.
Right.
You made a mistake. And the thing that you're happiest about is the mistake you made. David, what does that mean for you, dude?
Maybe it's not a mistake.
Shocking. So, very concretely, number one, your development, you're appropriate, right? Like this is what kids who are graduating college feel like. They're like, we haven't figured this crap out yet. There's a frontier. I don't know if I'm going to be able to make it. I've done pretty well so far, but who knows if any of that translates. There's a bunch of reasonable doubt. It's just normal. Like you're about to graduate college. Because that's what happens in college. Before you go to college, you're like, oh my God, it's college. What's going to happen? Am I going to fail out? Am I going to make friends? Oh my God, what's going to happen? Then you do freshman year, you do sophomore year, you learn how to do it. You're feeling okay, feeling kind of confident, maybe even having a little bit of fun. And then college ends. And then you're like, oh my God, it's the workplace. What's going to happen? Oh my God, am I going to find a job? Am I going to get a job? Is everything going to fall apart? And then you're going to be okay. Maybe a little bit of a bumpy ride. You're going to do okay. And then like, you're going to start relationships and it's like, oh my God, like I've never dated before. Like, I don't know what to do. Like, is it going to be okay? That's life. It's a series of getting good at something and then becoming a noob again. It's like climbing MMR. It's like I'm crushing these noobs at this MMR, and then like I'm moving up a rank, and it's like suddenly I'm a noob. Like it's life. So completely normal. Don't worry about it. I mean, you are going to worry about it, but I just want to share that with you, even if you can't digest it yet.
Right, yeah.
Second thing is be super careful concretely about the W's and when you move them to the L's. Like I want you to catch it in your mind when it happens. And ask yourself, like, why am I moving this to the L column? How do I actually feel about this? Like, even if you feel it's okay for other people, but it's not okay for me, you should still acknowledge that feeling. And be like, wow, I'm setting a really hard standard for myself.
Mm-hmm.
So notice when you transfer the W's to L's. So there's actually research that shows that people who have imposter syndrome do this. They attribute the successes of others to effort and hard work, but they attribute their own successes to luck or circumstances. They never take credit for their successes. So you've just got to start noticing it. Okay, my mom would be happy with this, but like if I had a kid, how would I feel? How would I respond to them? And then even if you can't do it yet, noticing it'll start to happen.
Mm-hmm. Well, I actually have like a little anecdote that's like related to it. So when I first went to Europe, the first month there, I struggled really badly. Like I don't know anyone there. I kind of speak the language. I don't like it wasn't in an English speaking country, and I just self-taught for a few months before I went. So I couldn't really communicate. My stomach is weird. I couldn't eat the food there. It would just give me like food poisoning every time, even though it was like a normal country, right? Like there's nothing wrong there. It was just me. But over like time, over like second month, third month, fourth month, like I started to feel like fine. Like, yeah, this is just life now. But someone told me it's like you've come so far from your first month. You do realize that, right? And I was like, I sat down and I thought about it. And I was like, yeah, I have, but that doesn't make me feel anything.
Yes. Look at that. Turned out your first month sucked. And you were okay. Turns out that you got a 4.00 your first semester instead of all 4.33s. And it turns out you're okay.
Right.
So just notice these things. Be patient with yourself, even in this. So I'd also be very careful about one conversation to catch me up, to fix me and turn me into what I'm supposed to be. The worst thing I could do for you, David, is have you leave from this conversation imagining that you're living up to the standard that you're supposed to be.
Right.
What you need to do is abandon the standard entirely.
Mm-hmm.
And like listen to
That's
yourself instead of what they're telling you. Don't ignore the outside world, right? So you should, like, if you want to get an internship in the last 6 months, like, hustle, you know, talk to your school about job placements and things like that. Talk to your professors. Like, you should do all that work, but like doing the work and feeling confident about it is actually completely independent, which you've proven to us today.
Right. Yeah.
Questions?
It's just tough to like when you talk about hustling and making connections and doing all that, it's like I also feel behind in that aspect. Like
Sure.
it's been COVID for a couple of years. I don't really know my professors. They're professors I like students that I know who are really close with professors because they've been like in lab with them. They've TA'd for them, stuff like that. It's like I don't even think that they would know my name,
Okay.
right?
So what are you going to do about that?
I would say change it, but I feel like I just don't have enough time.
Okay. So you don't have to do that, right? So I think there are some advantages, but this is where you start to feel behind in time. So I'd like ignore all the time stuff. You have classes now?
No, I have them in like a couple of days. Yeah.
I mean, are you in school right now?
Yeah, I am, but school hasn't like started yet. They start next week.
So that means that you're going to have a new professor that you've never had before?
It's the same professors generally. Like it's a pretty small department where like multiple professors teach multiple classes. Yeah.
So I just go and introduce yourself. How does that
Mhm.
feel to you?
Sounds weird, right?
Yes, it does sound weird. And this is where you're like, oh my God, I haven't done it for 3 years. How can I do it now? And it's like, I mean, your path forward is the same, whether you're ahead or you're behind. Like, that's all false. Like, we've determined that already. It's just do what you need to do. Say, hey, I've been in your classes for a couple years. My name is whatever. And then here's the other thing that you've got to be super careful about, David. You're sometimes shooting yourself in the foot. Because there are assumptions that you're making, which you're never giving people the chance to correct. So I know that your mom said, why is this a 4.0? But like, who knows? If you had continued showing them your report cards, maybe one of them would have said at some point, hey, this is a good job. I'm proud of you. We should go celebrate. But you only showed up one report card, so you're never giving them the opportunity. Maybe you'll go introduce yourself to your professor and you'll say, hi, hey, my name is Dave. And he's like, yeah, I know who you are. It's been a pleasure having you in the class. And you're going to be like, what?
Yeah, I would not expect that at all.
I mean, you've got a good GPA in a small department. I'm pretty sure they know who you are.
Maybe.
Maybe. Who knows? Who knows, right?
Yeah.
But so either way, they're like, whether they know who you are or don't know who you are, like, you should still just go and do it. And you're going to feel bad. You're going to feel behind. But that's not reality. That's all expectations and conditioning.
Yeah, that's true.
I'd focus on the W's and L's and just keep doing what you're doing, because it sounds like you're taking care of business like one step at a time, which is exactly what you should be doing.
Right.
Okay?
It just feels like I could be doing so much more.
Yeah, and you're going to continue to have that feeling. And as you do more, does the feeling go away?
Probably won't. It'll like elevate. It'll be like, but I could be doing X. I've achieved this, but it doesn't make me feel anything now.
Exactly.
I have other thing.
Good. So notice that. It takes practice, David. It takes practice, but you'll get there.
It definitely does. Yeah.
Yeah.
Because I don't think I've ever really like, aside from my grades, which I guess I also discounted with like that can of worms. I felt like, yeah, my GPA is high, but grades don't matter. Why? Like, I don't really have a reason to be proud of my grades.
Yeah. Yeah. So there's you moving a W to an L again, right?
Yeah.
So like, you're not going to be confident or proud of yourself as long as you keep doing that. So that's why it kind of goes back to that. Notice every time you do that. Notice how you try to live up to expectations. And remember that when you actually listen to yourself, instead of listening to the expectations, oh, I shouldn't introduce myself now because it's too late now. Other people know them better. That's all the voices from the outside. That's not going to lead you down. It may make you successful because you'll flagellate yourself to become a very high performer, but it won't make you happy.
Yeah, definitely. But even if I recognize that, how does that lead to like confidence or happiness? I have to manifest that from within, but I don't know like
It does.
how to feel that, right?
I mean, so I know it's very confusing, but that's the first step. And it's the same way. It's like in the same way that your study abroad experience is something that you're proud of. Like it's confusing. If you had never studied abroad and you had a conversation with yourself, you would not be able to convince yourself to study abroad.
Right. Yeah.
So that's where like, this is the point, David, where like, I can't answer the next step for you. If you ask, how does it happen? This is where I'd say, have awareness and do it. And then you tell us.
Right. Again, you said it in like one of your previous videos. I watched like your YouTube videos and stuff, but like people tell you that if you do X, X, and X, X, Y, Z, or whatever, it'll happen, but no one tells you when it's going to happen.
So patience.
Yeah.
Okay.
Mhm.
Good luck to you, David.
Thank you so much.
Take
I
care, buddy.
appreciate it. Thanks so much,
Adios.
Dr. K. Yeah. Thank you. Bye.
Okay. So let's recap quickly before we move on. So, a really common situation. Sometimes we grow up with expectations. And we try to live up to expectations. And in our attempts to live up to expectations, we actually do a decent job. But it doesn't feel like a decent job. Every time we do something, our mind tells us, you could do more. You could do better. It's not good enough. Other people are doing more. And the more we listen to that voice, why do we listen to that voice? It's because we want to be confident. We want to be happy. We want to be successful. And if our mind tells us like, oh, like, do more, do more, do more. And why do we listen to it? To make it shut up. Right? So we want to do something where our mind is like, good job. Instead of do more. So we're like, okay, I got to do more, and eventually the mind will be quiet. What are we actually reinforcing in that situation? We're actually reinforcing the behavior of inadequacy. We're reinforcing this idea that when I accomplish something, my mind tells me to do more. We're like literally activating those neurons of inadequacy over and over and over and over again. And so what do you find in these people? What you find is anytime there's a success, they take that W and move it to the L. And we heard today where that, like literally where that comes from. And so we have a 20-year-old who's got an excellent GPA, has studied abroad, exercises, has become more social, who's like, oh my God, I'm such a noob. If that guy's a noob, what does that make me? Right? So be careful about what your mind does. Be careful about using achievement as a shortcut to confidence. Because paradoxically, you can wind up in this situation where the more you achieve, your mind can always find someone who's better than you. Right? So be careful about that. And notice when your mind, when you do something that's a win and you move it to the L, as long as you keep doing that, you're not going to be confident in yourself because you don't let yourself celebrate the wins. You turn them into losses. There's all kinds of crap that can come up too, like, but if I start being content with my wins, does that mean that I'm apathetic and I'm not going to achieve anymore? Like, it's all kinds of crap that your mind will argue. It's a conversation for another day. We'll get a call on that eventually. But just focus on that. And be careful about trying to live a life where you live up to expectations instead of listening to what's in here. Because it's a fast way to unhappiness for sure. And paradoxically, in my experience, generally speaking, leads to less success over time because you get burnt out. It's not in your heart. When you show up at work, like even though it's prestigious, you don't actually want to be there. And what's going to happen is there's someone who actually wants to be there and is just as capable as you are, and then they're going to outperform you. And then that's going to make you feel worse. You're going to push yourself even farther to catch up to that person. But the more that you push yourself doing something that you don't enjoy, you'll just never catch someone who enjoys what they do. So listen to this and then move in a different direction where there's going to be a bunch of other people who have forced themselves into that situation, but now you're the one who's passionate about being there. And so then you'll rise to the top. Kind of bizarre. Think through a lot of your assumptions about stuff, like, is life a race? Like, what's at the end? Right? So I'll leave y'all with one last thing before we move on to the next caller. I realized this later. So I kind of like screwed around in my 20s instead of becoming a doctor. So I started med school around 27, 28. Finished med school at 32. And so people are like, I was thinking about that and I was like, oh my God, I'm so behind. I'm so behind. I finished med school at the age of 32. I had a friend from high school who finished med school at the age of 24. I'm 8 years older than she was. Oh my God. Then she started residency and worked 100 hours a week between the ages of 24 and 28. Whereas between 24 and 28, like, I went to India, spent some time at ashrams, did a lot of gaming. I had a blast. And so this is the thing that really confuses me about people who are trying to get ahead. Are you trying to get ahead so that you can retire at the age of 60 instead of 65 so you can really enjoy those last 10 years of your life? And sacrificing your 20s? Like, you're trading a year in your 20s for a year in your 60s. Is that a good trade? Just think about it for a second. Don't automatically accept whatever the expectations the world is feeding you. Twenties are a great time to waste time, honestly. Way better, I imagine, than wasting your time in your 70s. So Random 955 is asking, what if the expectation is not from external but myself? So this is the question you got to ask yourself. Very good question, Random 955. Where did that internal expectation come from? Because chances are it's not an expectation that was born of your introspection and exploration. It's an expectation that you internalized. Chances are. Right? Because that's where most of our expectations come from. All right, let's move on. Hello.
Oh, hey, that scared me.
Oh, sorry. What do you go by, friend?
Pierre.
Okay. And Pierre, what I think our prompt today is, where do you want to go and what's getting in the way?
Yep, that's exactly that.
Or sorry, who do you want to be, but what keeps you from getting there?
Yep.
So tell me, Pierre.
Can you hear me or not?
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay, cool. I got a disclaimer to do
Okay.
right now, just so we're on the same page. My English is not my first language, so I'm gonna try my best.
Okay, awesome. Thank you.
There you go. Where do I start? I think I'm just gonna read again what I've wrote on the Discord chat.
Okay.
So what I said is, my whole life I wanted to be a comic artist, webtoon artist, basically, telling my own stories to the whole world. But now I'm currently working on my dream project and trying to make a living out of it after dumping my girlfriend, sacrificing my social life, working all the damn time, and cutting all income. I kinda feel like I'm a prisoner of my own passion. I don't know if I'm ready to sacrifice my own happiness in the name of my future self, the successful storyteller I've striven to become, or just let go in order to become someone else not bound to my work but free to live. Pretty much it.
Wow, man, that's deep.
Yeah.
Okay. So Pierre, you are a rarity, my friend.
Oh, how is that? Why?
Because most people dream of giving up their careers, their lives. They want to give in to their passion, right? They
Oh
want to
yeah, that's
sacrifice
true.
everything. Like in the
Yeah.
movies, like I'm an artist and I'll sacrifice everything for the sake of my art.
Yeah. That's exactly that.
That's what everyone wants to do. Everyone's too afraid to do it.
Yep.
And so tell me about your sacrifices, my friend. How'd you make them? How'd you make those decisions?
Can I think for a sec?
Yep.
Just. I think the biggest sacrifice I went through was, especially in my dating life. I've been in a long streak since 2016. I've been through a lot of girlfriends, got a lot of relationships, and now it's just like a void. And it's not familiar. And it's kind of an expression of something different. And what are the words for that? I have no clue. That's why I'm here. And the other sacrifices are, like I said, is dating life, financial, that's the right word, social life. I don't see my friends that often. The only moment I can just interact with them is with a friend. I would go to the gym with them, and because I force myself. It's a pleasure to do it. It's like I like to do it, but I force myself to go outside and go to the gym just to, work on myself a little bit. And it's it's going to sound a bit familiar with your previous person you were chatting with, is that there's a lot of notion of feeling behind. Like, I'm surrounded by people, that amazing artists that are having their life together. They've got money, a lot of money, and they're just doing amazing things in the industry. They're concept artists, illustrators, and I'm 26 years old, still struggling on my thing. It's taking a long time to do it, and there's no certainty it's going to work at all. And it's scary. It's so scary because if it fails, it's like I've used all my cards basically.
Okay. When you say you're surrounded by people who are successful, how are you surrounded by them? What's the nature of your interaction?
Surrounded is, I'm close to a few friends that got back to my art school, and through circumstances, I've met other people through a Discord channel, and this Discord channel is private, by the way. So, and these people, I've finally met them in your person, and these people are enjoyable, amazing, and to say they are friends, it's a kind of a stretch, but these are people like I can share professionally, but that's pretty much it.
Okay.
But the other friends I have are coming from my art school
But
and
when you say these
yeah,
people are very successful, like how do you know? Like are they making a living making art?
Oh yeah, sure. Yeah. But to be fair, like if I should compare to most of freelance artists, like they're making money. Like I'm pretty sure of that. Like, are they like making millions? No, not at all. But they're successful and doing like kind of decent bucks in the industry. That's cool, especially when you're freelance.
And
I think it stems from basically the thing I'm comparing myself a lot. I got no money and no salary or income at the moment.
and so
Basically.
I'm not. What do you think that if you keep at it, you will I'm just not too familiar with your industry. So like what are the chances that you can sustain yourself financially?
I'm taking a direction that is very different from a lot of people I know. Like, I think it's gonna be easier for you to understand my struggle by just saying that what I'm doing is I'm it's not bragging or anything, but I know it's unique.
Okay.
It's not, it's like everyone is working for a client, they're doing freelance jobs, or they're working in a studio, or people are just working for, some friends I have are in the comic industry, the traditional comic industry, which is like you print comic books and you sell them worldwide. And I'm trying to do webtoons, and webtoons are just basically comics on phone, and you just scroll them and you got a story. And I I've been working on this idea, this project I got in my mind, and just whole thing of doing webtoons, and and I feel like I've got something to bring, but I don't know if this thing I want to bring is going to be accepted.
Okay. And how many hours a week do you spend on your project?
From Monday to Sunday, and basically 8 to 9 hours a day.
And so are you like is there like a completion point, or you're like uploading stuff regularly? Like what's getting in the way of success?
Perfect. I'm sorry, it's confusing. The
You're explaining things very well. This is just my ignorance of your industry.
Okay, fair enough. I think I'm gonna speak for myself what I'm doing at the moment and why I'm so scared. It's basically at the moment, comics takes comic takes a long time to do, like a very long time, and I'm trying to plan ahead. Like, to give you an example, I'm trying to work on this thing, and I'm trying to plan like in a year, basically. I know exactly how many things I'm going to do, how many chapters I'm going to do in the next August 2023, basically. I know how many things I'm gonna do. I know how many things I'm gonna draw. I know that all my weekends are gonna be like full of work. I know that that day and that day I'm going to rest.
Okay,
And
I thanks for explaining that, Pierre. I'm still not. I'm going to ask my question again. Sorry for interrupting.
yeah,
What is keeping you from being successful? Is this the kind of thing where your comics aren't out yet, or they're out and they're not getting
at the
visible?
moment it's not out. At the moment it's not out.
So
I'm there are a few free chapters that I've done for a contest. For those who are on Webtoon, they probably know there's been this contest called Call to Action, and I published my free chapters there. And you cannot publish on the thing like up until October. So I'm currently working on the storyboard, which is like kind of a rough of the future chapters you're going to do,
yep.
and that will help me to work on them in the future. And I'm going to publish them. How do you say that? Weekly.
So Pierre, here's what I'm kind of trying to understand is like, let's say you continued giving this your all and making sacrifices.
Yep.
Do you have a sense of like when you would at least have an initial like product where you like when's the first opportunity for you to be quote unquote successful? Let's put it that way.
To make a living out of it.
No, I know, but like when is that? Like, so let's say like I'm an author, right?
Yeah,
And I can say,
understood.
okay, I'm writing a book, but like
The
the book,
Yeah.
like when is the earliest opportunity that I could have to publish that book for it to hit shelves for people to start reading it? I'm trying to understand like where you
Yeah,
are practically. Like, what are we talking about here?
So at the moment, to say it like uh, in a funny way, would be like at the moment I'm nothing. I'm no one at the moment.
I get that you're no one at the moment. What I'm saying is, when is the first chance for you to be a someone?
Yeah. So the thing is, Webtoon are publishers as well, and what I'm striving for is to, you know, make the editors on Webtoon to notice me, and get a contract from them, or be successful enough and get viewed enough on the platform to have enough patrons to sustain myself in the future.
Okay. So, but
Basically.
yeah. So, like, what is the timeline for, like, so, but can anyone support you on Patreon or something right now? You don't have comics that are up right now, right?
At the moment, there are only 3 chapters. I'm doing a side project, which is like a tiny thing I'm doing at the moment. And at the moment, to be realistic, at the moment, I know that it's going to take a lot of time. It's going to take a long, long time. But how long it's going to be? Because the thing is, I've set up some kind of deadline until August 2023.
Okay.
Basically. So that helps.
So here's can I offer some thoughts, Pierre?
Yeah.
Okay.
Tell me.
So I've worked with a fair number of artists. I've worked with artists who are both successful and unsuccessful. So here's what I've noticed. So sometimes what holds an artist back is the quality of their craft. So for example, like if I'm an author, like my book just isn't good enough. And so sometimes like what I need to invest in is like becoming a better writer. Now that's kind of like a long-term investment. We don't really ever know if I'm going to get there or not get there.
Yeah.
Other artists I've worked at, they, much like yourself, feel like they've got a really good idea, have something unique, are willing to put in the effort. I'm going to assume for a moment that you have the skill to accomplish what you need to. But what I oftentimes find is that a lot of artists are so focused on the art that they sort of don't think about the practicalities, or it's not that they don't think about it, it's that they don't devote a lot of energy to exploring the practicalities. So I can write a really good book, but like if I want to make it, there's a difference between writing a good book and being a successful author. And it's in that gap that I think a lot of people fall short. So I have no idea how to judge whether your art has merit or not merit or things like that. Let's assume for a moment that if disseminated properly, your webtoons will be successful. Even if your webtoons are good enough to be successful, there are a lot of steps here, which I'm not hearing a whole lot of clarity on. Right? So like this is the kind of thing where if you're trying to decide, okay, what am I going to do? I'm making all these sacrifices. Because like basically what you're talking about is almost like not really being an artist. It's almost more like being an entrepreneur, especially or a content creator, especially in today's day and age, where, for example, like, you know, people who are successful at making web comics are very good at a lot of things besides making web comics. So, for example, you'll see, you know, social media posts about particular web comics. You know, they'll put up like a good Patreon page, things like that. So there's a lot of stuff here that I think if what I'm basically kind of hearing you say is like, I don't know if I should continue doing this or not doing it. Is that fair to say?
Can I just say something?
Yeah.
You seem pretty aware of what the industry is by everything you said. Like you seem to be pretty knowledgeable about what's going on. So just wanted to say that.
I mean, I don't know about webtoons, but like I said, I've worked with a lot of artists, because I just don't know. Like, if you were talking about writing a book, that's a process I'm way more familiar with. But my point is that because you're talking about money, right? So there's like a difference between like being an artist and paying your bills as an artist. And my point is that paying your bills as an artist, as we look at many artists who died penniless, right? Who now we revere their works of art. There's like this like simple thing where it's like, you know, being able to pay your bills is more about some of this other stuff. And what I'm hearing from you, there may be issues of confidence or this or that or losing yourself or things like that. But like my biggest concern is that you're grinding 8 to 9 hours a day, 7 days a week. But I'm not hearing like much of a business plan. Like, I don't know, okay, so you joined this contest. That sounds good. Like, that's the kind of concrete stuff that I'm kind of thinking about. And that's where I think like, you know, I mean, I don't know that we're not going to have time to do this because when I've worked with artists, it's been longitudinally and stuff like that. But usually it's sort of like sitting down and sort of thinking about, okay, so you've given yourself August of 2023. That sounds like a fantastic endpoint. But I think the key thing to remember there is whether August of 2023 is successful or a failure is going to depend on what you do in that time, which can be more than storyboarding and working on your art. right? Like, what's the end point? So in business, for example, there's this phrase called KPI, which is key performance indicator. And my biggest concern for you is that I don't know how to measure whether you're on the right track or not.
Yeah, and I think like aside business things, I think it stems from the fear of not doing enough, I guess. Because I know I'm working a lot in all the communication. I think it's just my biggest flaw. I'm not communicating enough on my project. I'm just doing a few stories on Instagram and posting a few stuff there and there once it's done, but I'm not taking the time to talk about it because I feel like, hey man, maybe you should work on this thing. Hey, it's not done enough. Work and work again. And I'm not taking the time to just talk about it.
Talk about it, you mean like social media wise?
Yeah, yeah.
So I know this sounds kind of weird, Pierre, because I'm not sure if you were like looking for more of like an internal exploration, but honestly, what I'm hearing from you is like more nuts. Like I think that, I don't know how to say this, but like no amount of internal exploration is going to be a substitute for playing the game of the industry.
Yeah.
And what I'm hearing is that you actually seem very introspective. You seem very devoted to your art. You seem like you feel very confident in an idea that you've got. And so what worries me more about you is not any of that stuff. Because you, like I said, like most people are struggling to make the leap, right? Like we started this off by saying you're really different from most people because most people play it safe and they're never able to make the leap and commit to their art. Since you've already given everything up, what concerns me the most is now that you've jumped off the cliff, how do we help you land the best? Does that make sense?
Yeah, it starts to make sense, yeah.
And so this is where I'd start, like, you know, my first thought is like, you have access to this Discord server. I don't know if people on the Discord server, if you've talked to them about how they've become successful and financially stable. Have you talked to them about?
No, I didn't.
Yeah, so I think you need to like use these opportunities to like try to figure out how an artist becomes financially stable. So like, and this is what I see with artists is that you'll devote yourself to your craft, but you can write the best, like as we've seen from artists in the past, they'll die penniless because they don't know anything about like marketing or selling, right? And that's the real challenge of being an artist is that everyone makes it seem like it's this creative pursuit, but the truth of the matter is if you're talking about art for the sake of paying your bills, then you've got to be a little bit more like entrepreneurial. So I would start by asking people on your Discord server, hey, like, so this is my situation. I'm kind of curious, how do you make ends meet? Do you feel like how do you balance like artistic development versus like taking freelance gigs? Because the other kind of thing that I'm kind of wondering, Pierre, is on a very basic level, if this is a long-term project where it's going to take 2 or 3 years of like storyboarding and revising and stuff like that, and you can't sustain yourself financially, then like it may be a better decision. Because I've been in situations, or I've worked with people who are like this, where, or, and even to a certain degree, been in this situation myself, where like I can't afford to make art for 3 years without paying bills. So I'm going to get a job and sustain myself. And it's going to take me 5 years instead of 3, but that's actually like the better plan.
Yeah.
And what I'm really hearing from you is that you've got to figure this out like more practically. Like, let's just assume that your art is going to be successful if you play your cards right.
Yeah. So it goes like a conversation of business conversation and like all business tips and stuff. Like,
well, I mean, not.
I'm sorry if it's not, the typical conversation.
No, I mean, it doesn't bother me. I love having this conversation.
Oh, God,
I think it's a conversation we actually don't have enough in this community because I think you are, Pierre, someone who's like, you've overcome your expectations and overcome, like money and like you've like taken the plunge. And so now the issue is for people who've taken the plunge, like, how do we understand, okay, like who would potentially buy your comic? Who would pay for your webtoon? Who are the communities that would like support you on Patreon, right? Even if you're offering something unique, there may be a particular audience. How do you get in front of those communities? You know, how do you know, like, let's say you take it to an editor and an editor says, okay, we're not going to buy this at this time. How do you know what you need to change for that person to say yes? Like, these are the kinds of things that I'm not really hearing from you, which I'm afraid the only reason that bothers me is because you're trying to pay your bills.
At the moment, paying the bills is not an issue. Like I forgot to give a little bit of context. Is I'm currently living in my parents' house at the moment, so I got food, I got the roof.
Yeah. So I sort of got that, right? So I didn't ask you how you're sustaining yourself because you're saying I'm not making any money. So I put two and two together there. But my point is that even by August 2023, like, my worry is that you'll spend 7 days a week, 9 hours a day, making art, storyboarding, but you're so disconnected from your audience that after that year, you show up with something and it's like not what people are looking for, or you haven't built enough like social media stuff over time, or like whatever. Because I've even like, I don't know if you've heard of this guy named, have you ever heard of a guy named Brandon Sanderson?
Yep.
So Brandon Sanderson actually had a podcast. I think he's still got it. But the podcast was basically with 3 people. And one of the people is a webcomic person.
Oh.
And so he talks a lot about, like, they talk about like how to be successful as a webcomic artist and what it takes and stuff like that. So I'm getting the sense that, you know, from an art standpoint, you seem solid. It's just like, how do you think through things so that you know how to present your art?
Yeah. I got a question. Do you think I'm self-sabotaging here? Because I got a feeling I am. I'm aware of everything you said here, but I feel like there's a part of me which is trying to, you know, not do this job and just to focus on the art I'm doing as some kind of escape of responsibilities I have and a success that I don't know if I want. Like, if that's something I have built for many, many years, but it's like I'm so close to it, but I'm not putting all the tools there to have it. And I know I have to do it, but I don't do it. I'm just doing art, doing my thing on this side.
Do I think you're self-sabotaging? I mean, if you're asking the question, maybe, but here's what I'd say.
Yeah.
I know a lot of artists who really like making art. And I know a lot of artists who don't like anything except for making art. And here's the thing to understand about success. So a lot of times people think that success is being really, really, really good at one thing. But in my experience, being successful is being really, really good at one thing, or even decent at one thing. But it also requires a minimum competence in a bunch of other stuff that you may not like doing. And the artists that I've worked with who are more successful, like, objectively, I'm not talking about the quality of their art. I mean, can pay their bills, people know who they are, the reach of their audience, are the ones who focused, you know, they still primarily focus on their art, but they don't ignore the other stuff. So is there something psychological going on? Sure. But I think the real question is, like, if you know you need to do this stuff, like, I'm not so sure that it's psychological. Honestly, it sounds to me a little bit more operational, which means that you've just never done this before, so your brain literally doesn't know the steps.
Yeah.
Like,
it's scaring me.
Yeah, so and that's normal. That's just because it's like, if I tell you, Pierre, you know, you say you've had several girlfriends before, but if you'd never dated anyone and I'm like, go get a girlfriend, it's going to be like scary to people, right? Because they've never done it before.
Yeah.
So this is where, I mean, is it self-sabotage? I don't think so. I don't get the sense that this is like a deep psychological, like, you know, I mean, I have no idea. If we spent a lot of time together, maybe it would be the case, but I don't get the sense that you're like trying to shoot your success in the foot. I think the problem is that you've figured out that you're good at one thing. There's one thing that excites you. You can grind towards one thing. And there's a lot of stuff that you don't really like know to how to even start with that like, so you don't know how to start, so you don't know how to do it.
Sure.
What do you think about that?
I'm thinking. No, I think it's just the main fear I have. The main fear. It's not fear. It's just something I'm not used to. Is just when I'm seeing all these people are selling themselves on social media, they seem false. They seem not real, and that's something I cannot do. Even if we force me to do it, it's something I cannot do because the people that are mostly successful by selling art and doing stuff are people on social media. Speaking of it, on social media are people that are playing a game of trends and things that I'm not good at all. And even if I force myself to do it, I can't. I really can't.
So I think you've got to be careful there because you're assuming that, first of all, people on social media are fake. And secondly, that you have to be fake to succeed on social media.
Mm.
I think that a lot of people on social media are fake, but I think that the audience of social media is tired of fake people on social media. And there's actually a hunger for authenticity.
Mm.
And I would say, you know, if we want to talk about self-sabotage, if you're concluding in your mind that I have to be fake to be successful, I'm not saying that being faker will make you more successful. But I think that there's like, I mean, even the story that you're sharing today, I think a lot of people would resonate with.
Yeah.
And
That's what I would love to hear people like that.
Yeah, so that's why I think like what I would kind of do is like, you know, I mean, you got to be careful because I don't really know your situation, but I would start by talking to people on your Discord and just ask them, hey, do you have some time to talk? I'd love to learn about like your creative process. How do you manage like art versus like, you know, creating art versus paying bills, freelance gigs versus not freelance gigs? How many hours a week do you work? How do you storyboard? You know, how much time do you spend? How long did it take you from the first idea to like getting your first finished webcomic? For whatever website you want editors to pay you for, I would also approach them. Hey, I have these 3 chapters. They're in this competition. Is this something that y'all would be interested in? What are y'all looking for right now? Right? So like asking some of those questions, and that's where you may say like, oh my God, it's my art. I never want to compromise an inch of it, which is totally fine. But what you may find, and this has been my experience as a content creator, is that like my range is actually pretty wide and I'm actually okay adapting a little bit to what people are looking for. Just to give you an example, when I started streaming, before my first stream, I spent 3 months indexing like 150 scientific papers because I was convinced that when I show up on Twitch, everyone is super skeptical and everyone's going to want references and citations and sources. And what I was really surprised by is like, I didn't get any questions about science. I got tons of questions about spirituality. And like, even though I had this idea of what I wanted to share, which is I wanted to teach people about mental health, it turned like more into a spiritual kind of thing. And like, I was actually okay making that adaptation. And there may be adaptations that you're actually okay making. But my point is that, right, I think your biggest problem, honestly, Pierre, is that it sounds like you're working in a studio for like 70 hours a week without like talking to anyone.
Yeah, that's kind of the thing.
And so I think if you want to be successful, that's not about the quality of your art. That's about communication between your art and the rest of the world.
It takes time, right?
Sure, which is why if you've got till August 2023, I think that's fantastic. But I think the earlier you get started, the better. And I'm not saying make any commitments. I'm just saying start having conversations so you understand what is out there and like what it's going to take.
It's bizarre because everything you say, I'm quite aware of all of this stuff. I made this conscious choice to work tirelessly on this thing because it takes so much time. Like, I know that I have to communicate on all this stuff. I know that I have to share my story out there. I know that I've because I'm already doing it in a way on Instagram. I'm just sharing stuff there. I'm posting there. I'm trying to find solutions to change how I post them. It's just I don't feel like I'm doing enough. And if I'm trying to do more, it will be okay. Like, do I have to change something the way I express myself? Is it good or not? It's just
Pierre, so I'm hearing you're asking, do I need to be doing more? Am I doing enough? And my point is that I don't think your problem is one of what's the right move. I think your problem is not one of treatment, it's one of diagnosis. I think your problem is that you don't know how to answer those questions yet, right? You don't know, am I doing enough or not? So how do you know? How do you answer the question of, am I doing enough on social media?
I don't know.
You ask other people
Hmm.
so that you understand what the average is.
Sure.
So I think you need more information from other people in your industry, which may be a very unsatisfying answer. Because oftentimes it's like, tell me about your upbringing and stuff like that. But honestly, this is the kind of thing where like, bro, honestly, I want to see you succeed. But I think whether you succeed or not there may be a certain amount of like internal stuff. Like, why is it hard for you to have these conversations? Like, there may be some kind of shame or like you feel embarrassed to ask, or like there may be some internal stuff. But what I'm saying is like very practically, you've got to figure out like, what's your business model for success as an artist?
No, to be fair, like the fact that you're just telling me that it's just practical stuff, it's just reassuring.
Good.
That means that I'm okay.
Yeah.
I'm doing fine. If I should shift the conversation elsewhere, it's what am I going to do in August 2023 if it fails? And this thing scares me so much. So much. Because I have no clue what to do. No clue. It's like this thing I've been carrying for so long. I mean, right? It's not bragging or anything. I hate to say this, but it's just I've been working on this thing for so long, and I know there's this thing in my mind going like, "Hey, man, you've been working on this thing for so long. You deserve success. You deserve this." But another part of me is saying, "Hey, man, the world doesn't work like that. They don't care about you."
So here's what so this is going to sound kind of weird too. So I've got two kind of answers to that. The one is that you may have to deal with a certain amount of that now, but I think trying to solve that problem of 2023 now is a waste of your time. And what I mean by that is that, so like, because what happens in 2023 depends on, I know this is going to sound weird, but what happens in 2023 depends on what happens in 2023. So when August of 2023 rolls around, what do you do? Well, that depends. Like maybe in August of 2023, you've got a Patreon page with 4 subscribers. And maybe in August of 2023, you've got 0 subscribers. Maybe in August of 2023, you've got 100 patrons. Maybe in August of 2023, the editor says, hey, I really think that you're onto something, but we're looking for something that's more appealing to this group. And so what I'm saying is like, it's like there's no point in figuring out what you're going to do after 2023 because your position in 2023 could be in like 10 different places.
Yeah, it's left to randomness, right?
Right.
Chance.
So I think that's why it's like kind of like, once again, in medicine, it's sort of like, well, what if the test comes back positive? Well, like, let's see what the test shows. Because the results of the test inform the next steps. And so the only tricky thing there is that you're going to have to move forward with some amount of like fear and uncertainty just hanging out with you. I'm not saying it's easy to do that, right? Like, because that worry is going to be in your head and you've got to live with that. But,
yeah, I'm waking up with it every morning.
But I mean, so that's challenging, and so meditate and all that other good stuff. But I think at the end of the day, like, we can't figure out what to do in August of 2023 because, like, who knows? Like, maybe you'll win this contest, and then 14 editors will be like, we want your webtoon, and then you really created something unique, and the internet absolutely loved it. And then suddenly, like, you've got a merch store, and people are ordering prints, and like, who the hell knows what's going to happen in August 2023? In August of 2019, like, no one predicted COVID. So I'd say, like, focus on what you've got to do this week, the next week, the week after that. I'd be really careful about not being too zoomed in on just making your artwork, and recognize that some things don't take a lot of work, but it takes time to grow. Right?
Yeah,
So, like, there's a difference
true.
between building something and, like, growing something. And I wouldn't wait until, July of August 2023 to plant the seed of social media.
Oh, no. I would be doing, like, I'll be working on social media. Like, I would be sharing stuff by saying, hey, it's going to have
Yeah, so
all this
I think,
webtoon going on, there are chapters on, you can read it there. But it's not going, like, to be, like, all social media, like doing reels, and it's just gonna be pretty basic. But because I don't have time to do more, just that.
yeah,
but I'm
that's okay.
planning
But
to
so
do it.
that's where, like, I think you're trying to solve a lot of problems without the appropriate information, Pierre. That's, like, kind of the beginning of end of what I'm hearing. Like, that's the most important thing. So I talk to these people on this Discord and try to figure out, like, how this works. Whatever website you're trying to get to, try to do that. Even, whatever call to action, like, that all sounds like good stuff. You just got to figure this stuff out. And that is, like, you can try to figure it out on your own, but the whole point is that you're in this private Discord server that is invite only with successful artists. So you've got a lot of information at your fingertips. And you'd be amazed at how much you can learn by just asking people. Okay?
Sure.
Thanks for calling in, man.
I'm doing good, I guess. Wasn't expecting to have this conversation. I thought I was going to have, like, oh man, maybe you should change your career, or maybe you're not doing the good choice, or something like that. But no, it's just
No.
apparently I'm doing the thing that not most people are doing.
Yeah. So, I mean, to summarize, Pierre, I think it's not my place to say that you should change your career, or it was a mistake or not a mistake.
Sure, yeah.
What I'm hearing is
But
that you've taken the plunge and you've made a lot of sacrifices. So my primary concern is now, like, how can we make sure that those sacrifices are as worth it as we can make it?
Yeah.
Good luck to you, my friend.
Yeah. Good luck to you too. Thank you.
Take care.
You too. Bye.
Okay. So, quick summary. So that's kind of interesting. So first of all, it's cool to have, artists in our community. I think it is interesting because sometimes the challenge that we have is, like, how do I take the plunge? How do I quit my dead-end job? How do I make these sacrifices? And we almost, like, fantasize that if I make all these sacrifices and I devote myself to my craft, then I will be successful. But the truth of the matter is, like, making the sacrifices is a really important but also insufficient step. Then there's a lot of other stuff that you have to do, which is more than the madness of the creative process in your studio. And sometimes, like, this is what I've seen with a lot of artists, is, like, really the ones who are successful versus the ones who are less successful. We're talking about, like, fame, money, like, those are the barometers of success. I'm not commenting on the quality of their art. I don't know how to judge that. It's actually the ones who have a minimum amount of competence in a lot of these other dimensions. Social media, relationships, networking, even to a certain degree, like, discipline and taking care of themselves and waking up on time and going to bed on time and things like that. Like, that's the stuff that you really have to do. I mean, like, so for example, you can be the most brilliant doctor in the world, at least in the United States. But unless you are up to date with your documentation and your CME and a bunch of other administrative crap, like, you're not going to make it as a doctor. Because being a doctor is not just about practicing medicine. It's about all of the administrative stuff that comes with practicing medicine. And that's true of like any profession, right? There's like the actual work of the profession, and there's all the stuff that you do on the side so that you can do the work of the profession. And oftentimes artists, because it's so much about craft and passion and vision and creating something unique, that like we kind of lose sight of that other stuff. And oftentimes it's the stuff that you don't enjoy doing, haven't done, don't know how to do. It's like business kind of stuff. But I've really just noticed a big difference between artists who are aware of that stuff and artists who aren't. Case in point, you know, Brandon Sanderson has a podcast about all of this other stuff, and look at where he is. Okay, last one. Let's go.
That's all we have for today.
Oh, okay, awesome. Fantastic, because we're 1 hour late already. All right, so now we have something really cool that we're going to do, actually, chat. We are going to... Was that 2 or 3 today?
That was 2.
Okay. So today we're going to now share with y'all our community event. You want to stick around for this, Kabir?
Yeah.
Okay. What we're going to do is actually share with y'all our new community event. Okay. So let's take a look. So we are in the month of September. Our community event is Connect the Dots. So Connect the Dots is a scavenger hunt that spans everywhere you can find HG. So there are 6 phases, 6 rewards. The goal is for the community to work together to unlock clues and then connect the dots and collect rewards. So we're going to start today. Phase 1, the reward is going to be a new stream emote. Then we move on to phase 2 with new merch. Phase 3, I guess I'm going to dress as a monk for stream. Interesting. Phase 4, I'm going to take bad mental health quizzes. Phase 5, we're going to do monk stories. And phase 6 is going to be a cooking stream. Okay? If y'all liked the ASMR, wait for the cooking. But the community has to do it. So events. So hints will be dropped during events to help people along in the scavenger hunt. Hints won't be recorded, so people need to be there or make sure someone is participating. So ask a coach in Social Sandbox. Y'all will get hints there. You can check the Discord for a detailed schedule. So Connect the Dots also involves weekly challenges. So each week we're going to have a unique challenge. The challenge will be one task, but a large group of people need to complete the task in order to win the challenge. Things like cleaning, meditating, journaling, etc. Okay? So I hate to break it to y'all, but once again, you have to do something good for yourself and put together your life, something in your life to do this challenge. The last thing is that this is a community challenge. So the point is to collaborate. So the goal is not to figure this out all on your own, but to work together with the community to try to figure it out together. So you can join us on Discord and explore.healthygamer.gg/connectthedots. So we're going to share with y'all the first clue. I have a voice that you can hear. Try to control me and I won't disappear. Let me run and I will tire. Push me too far and you're playing with fire. So that's number 1. Okay? And Tech Teller, should we send them anywhere or should I just raid?
That's it. Just
Okay,
raid.
awesome. So who do we want to raid today? Chat. Everyone's saying mind, ego, anxiety, anger. That's a good question. Right? So yeah, everyone's saying answer. Like what, like, yeah. Those all could be the answer. Okay. Okay, I'm seeing Papa Bragon. Papa Ivory Cello. Okay, y'all want Ivory Cello? We can do Ivory Cello. Sure. Okay, we'll see y'all on Wednesday. I think we're taking Labor Day off. And do the connect the dots challenge. For those of y'all that are guessing, that's just the first part of it, right? So we'll see y'all in a few days. So have a good weekend and much love. Adios, everybody. 3, 2, 1, boop.